почив останнє на цей світ біленький, у смертну годину козак мовив так: хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Як вороги кляті нас на кіл саджали, як живцем палили, у смолі пекли, козаки у хата життя не благали, про долю країни думи їх були. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Щоб буяла воля, щоб раділи люди, дай Бог їм останнє ці слова сказать. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки, хай цвіте червона калина, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки, нехай згинуть воріженьки на вічні віки. Хай живе, живе вільна Україна, хай живуть, живуть вічно козаки,
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптям посорбати довбані щі, та трохи в ущах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для восстановлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm joined by Enforcer Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody.
And today we're going to be reporting the Day 80 news. Day 80 of the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. We are just 10 days away from reaching the end of the third month of the war in Ukraine, and we can see that the Ukrainians have once again managed to pretty much catch victory in the jaws of defeat. We've seen here near the Kharkiv area that there's still been a major collapse ongoing. It is now confirmed even by major mainstream news sources. Of course, they're always several days behind us, but they finally confirmed as well that the Kharkiv front is collapsing and will most likely disintegrate within the next week. We've also had some very interesting news out of that area of the Russians betraying their allied fighting forces from the DPR and LPR, as they're threatening to shoot them on sight if they try and cross the border. We'll get to that news, of course, a little bit later on in tonight's stream. But with that, let's go over tonight's schedule and see what we've got in store. Starting off, we will be starting in the Kyiv area. We have one bit of news from Kyiv, which is of course very interesting to cover. We'll then actually move straight into Russia and then report some news from Moscow, which is actually fairly hilarious, I do have to say. And I hope that y'all like this one as well, because it shows you how far Russian patriotism actually goes. We'll then go down to the location unknowns and cover all of the location unknowns. We actually have a fairly high amount of them, 16 of them as a matter of fact today. Once we cover the location unknown news, we'll then start moving towards the Kharkiv front, which is the reason why tonight has the title of the video it does. But before we get there, we're actually going to take 3 questions from the chat, and once we get done with that question segment, we'll then move on to the Kharkiv area. We'll also cover a sum of the Donbass news. We're actually going to only cover the area around Izium, and then we'll pause once again to answer another 3 questions from the chat. We'll then answer the rest of the Donbass news from this area, the Southern Front news, which there has been almost none. We'll then wrap up tonight's stream with the international news from the Netherlands and also Antarctica. Unfortunately, I actually forgot to color that one because it's just so out of the way. And then finally, once we get through all of the international news, we will then return back to Kyiv and round out tonight's stream with a speech from President Zelenskyy. Of course, it is the usual way we round out these streams, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Starting off in Kyiv, we've seen that U.S. politicians have once again arrived and are visiting President Zelenskyy. This time, it is not the First Lady, Nancy Pelosi, or any of the former people who have visited before. We actually see that it's a new batch of people, including Republican Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. So, here's the video. We've seen a large amount of the high-level politicians from the United States visit Ukraine at this point, but we are still waiting for the President of the United States himself to arrive in Kyiv and meet Zelenskyy personally. That has not occurred as of the moment.
And very happy to see you, sir. Thank you.
We know each other.
A little bit, yeah.
A little.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, please.
And we invite our delegation also to join.
With that is the end of the video, but we can still see that bilateral support of the war in Ukraine on both sides of the aisle, touching on politics a little bit, is highly prevalent, although there has been some minor bumps that have occurred in the political process as of late in providing aid and support to Ukraine. Unfortunately, we don't cover politics on this channel, so I'm not going to go into that, but we can see that there is a large amount of support here in the United States by all politicians, as far as I'm concerned, in the support of Ukraine and continuing on and ensuring that Ukrainian victory will be at hand. We will now move on outside of Ukraine and we'll move into Russia, where in Moscow today, we've seen a Russian man show how far his patriotism actually goes. This man bailed, and it's hilarious. This interviewer here, I'm not sure if these text-to-speech captions at the bottom will be seen, but to explain really quickly, he's going to ask this Russian a series of questions And all of them are revolving around how patriotic are you? And this man answers, oh, I'll go to hell and back to help out Russia. And so then the reporter asks, would you like to sign off on this registry so that way we can get in contact with you if things go to worse? And this man bails. So just in case of the speech to text cannot be seen at the bottom of the screen, that's the story of this video. And so now I'm going to let y'all see it for yourselves because it's hilarious.
Вперед чего?
Своей страны.
Конечно,
На что вы готовы ради страны?
на все.
Смотрите, у нас есть патриотический список. Можете, пожалуйста, нам оставить свои данные и в случае всеобщего...
Oh, my lord, it's turned slideshow. Hang on, everyone. We're going to try and get this out of slideshow mode.
Своей страны.
Конечно,
На что вы готовы ради страны?
на все.
Смотрите, у нас есть патриотический список. Можете, пожалуйста, нам оставить свои данные?
It's going slideshow again, but maybe if I skip forward.
Подождите, почему?
No? Oh, my lord. Come on, this is the funniest one. Hang on, y'all. Just a second. I'm going to see if refreshing it a third time will do anything. Let's see. Yes! Okay, so it did fix it. So let me get it on full screen and play it.
Пожалуйста, нам оставить свои данные и в случае всеобщей мобилизации у вас будет... Подождите, почему? Мужчина, почему не готов?
And I have to mute it there because there's copyrighted music playing, and YouTube actually got me for a little bit of copyright music played yesterday, just for y'all to know how serious that is. But you can see here, this man bailed out as soon as he heard that he was going to be put on a registry for a draft. Just look at the expression on his face. It went from being prideful for his country to fearful that he was actually going to have to hold up what he says, and he took off. Let's watch that again.
Пожалуйста, нам оставить свои данные и в случае всеобщей мобилизации у вас будет... Подождите,
He is
почему?
gone.
Мужчина, почему не готов?
And so I have to say, that's hilarious. That's really what we're seeing from the Russians as a whole, even the fighting forces and the soldiers that are fighting in Ukraine, is that they're willing to put up a large amount of talk, but once push comes to shove, they generally just bail out. I mean, like, in terms of Russian tank crews, they literally bail out. Once there's a little bit of resistance or a little bit of pushback to Russian tank forces moving around, they just crawl out of the tanks and run off for the most part, leaving them in complete running order, not even slightly damaged or sabotaged to assure that the Ukrainians cannot take those tanks and use them themselves. So right here we can see that that doesn't only extend over from the Russian soldiers in Ukraine. This also extends over into the Russian citizenry and them actually having to carry through on what they're saying. With that, we're now going to move back into Ukraine to cover the location unknowns. And starting off today, we can see that a Russian road trip was canceled very abruptly as the Ukrainians had other plans for them. I'm going to let y'all see this video. It is something interesting that they used an ATGM against a UAZ car. It's not even an armored car. It's just literally a normal car, but the Ukrainians used an ATGM against it. It is a little overkill, but at the same time, I'm sure that the Russians won't be using this UAZ again. As you can see here, the ATGM is flying towards the car. And just like that, the road trip was canceled. Now, I'm not particularly sure why they weren't taking any chances in hitting this UAZ with an ATGM. I'm not sure if it was carrying some higher-ranking Russian officer. Usually cars like this are used either for reconnaissance units or moving around commanders. So I'm not particularly sure why they used an ATGM to wipe the thing out, but still, they hit a UAZ, and that one was certainly knocked out, and most likely the personnel operating and inside the vehicle were taken along with it. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we see the Ukrainian Chechens heading to the front. And that's something that a lot of people don't really think about, or it's in the back of our heads a lot, is that there's actually Chechens that live in Ukraine, a sizable population of them, as a matter of fact. And so they've actually found it very offensive during this war to be called, for the Kadyrovites, or Kadyrovites, as I've heard them say sometimes, they're very offended that they're being called Chechens, because in the Ukrainian Chechens' eyes, those Kadyrovites are not actually Chechens. So I've been trying to correct that whenever I talk about the Kadyrovites or the Russian Chechens, because I don't want to come off as abrasive to the Ukrainian Chechens who don't want to be disgraced as in being put in that same pool along with the other Kadyrovites from Chechnya and Russia. With that, we can actually see that the Ukrainian Chechens are heading to the front themselves and joining the fight for Ukraine. We've already known that there has been a sizable amount of Chechen Ukrainian forces fighting in this war. We used to see a decent amount of footage of them fighting near Kyiv, and now we can see that even more Chechens are joining the fray and joining in the fight to fight the good cause. With that, here's the video.
Allahu Akbar. Шолов Карон, батальон. На фронт, на фронт, на фронт. Так, это вторая колонна. Едет на фронт. Это баги.
Look at that buggy. Okay, hang on. I have to go back here in 1 second. Let me go switch back to my analytics page on the second monitor. But look at that buggy that they're pulling off. That is a nice buggy. I mean, like, that kind of looks like a go-kart, a really souped-up go-kart, but I like that. That's pretty neat. And we'll also show a little bit more footage later on that the Ukrainians are starting to use ATVs/buggies to a huge degree now, and it does appear to be the new technical of our modern fighting age. I'm going to let the video continue.
автобус военный так وين ان شاء الله جروبيور ويا позиции шкалёвич да молодо саа шويه да тягвал ان شاء الله حاول طبعا كان جنسمين وما يشم تاكس ضايش انسان продукт وما حوش هاش تبغى شبوش خيتا بلسه ده حبو وربو نعم اخو ساعه شويه دا تغوار ان شاء الله الله اكبر الله اكبر.
And that is the end of the video. We can now see that more Ukrainian Chechens are joining in the fight, and hopefully they will be much more competent, which we already know that they are. We know that the Ukrainian Chechens went above and beyond in their fighting prowess in the Kyiv area, and so I'm sure that these Ukrainian Chechens will be making that gold star mark, well, not the gold star way in the American way, but the gold star in perfection on the front lines fighting against the Russian forces, much like the Chechens who have already gone before them. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian Mi-8/Mi-17 in action. I wasn't exactly sure which variant of the Mi-8 helicopter this was. Once again, the caption isn't clear either. The cockpits are the same in either model, but there are slight differences that variates a Mi-8 from an Mi-17, and then there's a million variations of each beyond that. Of course, I do have to mute this video because it has copyrighted music. YouTube will come down here and pretty much knock my kneecaps off if I play copyrighted music. I found that out last night, and I hardly even played any, so sorry about that, but here's the video. As we see, the Ukrainian helicopter is flying nearly above the tree line. We can actually see another Ukrainian helicopter right in front of it that tilted upwards and then fired off its load of rockets. We can now see this helicopter tilt up and also fire off its rockets as well, most likely towards Russian armed forces further outside of view. Tilting upwards and firing off rockets at a high arc is something that we've seen both sides doing, and I believe it's one of the few ways that helicopters in a modern war, sorry, I had to get my wording right there, can actually operate, because if they were to fly high enough to actually see their forces and fire at them, they would be at very high risk of being shot down by ground anti-air. So, of course, very interesting to see, and hopefully these rockets are not being aimed in the vicinity of a Ukrainian village. I would think that the Ukrainians are very much above that. We have not seen any evidence of them shelling their own villages, unless if there is specifically a military unit that they're trying to hit right there on film. So hopefully this wasn't aimed at any civilian population centers. And so with that, that is the end of that video. We're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see that shells are being labeled as revenge for Flight MH17. Some of y'all may have never been familiar with Flight MH17, and to give it a little bit of context, Flight MH17 was actually a commercial airliner that was flying over Ukraine, specifically the Donbass region, during the 2014 Donbass conflict. Russian ground anti-air units directed their fire at this commercial airliner and shot it down, killing every single person on board, 193 people. Here we can see in Dutch writing on the shell for Flight MH17, or Revenge for Flight MH17. So I'm glad to see that the Ukrainians and the Dutch, apparently this is a Dutch unit that may have written that, or the Ukrainians are doing a favor for the Dutch, but it's good to see that they're going to get back at the Russians for another heinous war crime that occurred so long ago but was never actually avenged. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see another M777 in action. We are starting to get loads of footage of M777s in action all across the country, as we can see that the Ukrainians are incredibly fond of this new artillery system, the incredible range it has, and also its destructive capabilities and pinpoint accuracy. So, here's the video. Of course, I have to mute it because it does have copyrighted music. But here we can see one of the M777s being fired in Ukraine. We can now see one being moved. I was also told that these M777s were also accompanied by Oshkosh trucks, which were also lended by the United States along with the artillery pieces. We can now see them preparing the fire of the piece once again. And based off of the amount of videos that are coming out on the M777, it's very clear to me that the Ukrainians look at this as a wonder weapon in terms of the capability of this artillery piece. They don't really do a lot of videos of artillery in particular, unless if it's something like an MLRS. Because MLRSs, of course, are always impressive to watch, and MLRSs are really run-of-the-mill in their capabilities as far as make to make, specifically the Eastern models. Once you get into American models, the MLRSs do have an increased range, but so far the Ukrainians haven't gotten any of those. However, they finally did get the M777 we're seeing here on film, and they are loving it. We've actually heard official reports made by the Ministry of Defense saying how much of an efficient and effective artillery piece the M777 has now become in the Ukrainian arsenal. So we can see a montage of the M777 here firing over and over and over. Hopefully raining down very accurate fire directly on Russian units and wiping out a large amount of infantry or Russian fighting vehicles, whether they be tanks or armored personnel carriers or everything in between. With that, that's the end of the video, but we can see that the Ukrainians are having a blast with their brand new equipment. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see an old man asking when the fight will be over. I believe that I'm not really sure what the intention was behind this old man, and it's very hard to give the context as to how he was saying this, but he is standing in the middle of the village near his car, and he's telling this Ukrainian soldier the battery's gone out on my car, and this kind of sucks. Anyways, I'm just going to let y'all see the entire discussion in between the Ukrainian soldier and this old man here, because it's actually really funny. And the Ukrainian soldiers are actually trying to offer him as much help as possible, but the soldier's like, please, get in the side, man. There's about to be a firefight going on. So I'm going to let y'all see the video.
Да. Пізніше там пройде бій і затягнете машину, і затягнемо машину вам.
Добре, дякую.
Чого ти?
А підуть ви не знаєте, так?
Ну, в нас немає розпорядку насправді.
Я понял. Коротше, як перестануть стріляти, я виходжу сюди з паличкою.
Да.
У мене сів акумулятор, світу немає. Більш немає. Все, хоч плач.
Щось придумаємо, тільки не зараз.
Ну добре, дякую.
Будь ласка.
В общем, через пару годин я буду тут стояти, так?
Да. Ну, як почуєте, що не стріляють, десь годину так не стріляють, то можете виходити.
До 2 і буває до 4. Там буває. Іди отсюда, бо я тобі зараз дам. Іди отсюда. Іди гуляй.
I have to say that this old man is an absolute boss. It's funny to see him just out there, and you can actually hear a little bit of a firefight going on in the background, and he's just asking the soldier, when's the shooting? When do you think it'll be over? Could you help me replace my battery? It's dead. This guy's just acting like it's just a normal day, and this is just a passerby, and he's just asking for help. I find it incredibly hilarious, and I also like how polite the Ukrainian soldier was to this old man. Instead of being like, get out of here, old man. What are you, senile or something? There's a firefight going on. And he's like, yeah, we'll help you. Just get inside and wait for the shooting to end. So Very funny video. I have to say, this old man's really cool. I like him. He seemed pretty nice guy, pretty chill guy too. And the soldier did as well. So very interesting little interaction there. And so we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can hear a Russian prisoner saying a very weird thing. I mean, like incredibly weird. I'm just going to let y'all see this and let this be run by y'all twice, like the title of my caption says, because this is something a little interesting. Here's the video.
Один по случайности офицер.
Один по случайности?
Да, один по случайности.
Как произошло, не знаете?
Он, то есть, он в окопе находился с автоматом, то есть оружие он из рук боялся выпустить. И получается, лег спать, на предохранитель не поставил, и в результате ночью, пока спал, застрелился.
Okay, I have to stop the video right there and mute it because copyright music does play. But I think by the little tone right there, you can get the idea of what song was about to play. But to run this by y'all one more time, the officer of this man's unit was actually carrying his gun with him everywhere, and he would not let it go. And so he brought it with him to bed and apparently aimed the rifle right under his chin, apparently with his finger on the trigger and the safety off, and in the middle of the night, he just blew his brains out on accident. Pretty much, like, committed suicide unintentionally. So I'm just going to let y'all see that text roll out one more time so that way y'all can get the idea of who's leading Russian infantry in the field.
Оружие он из рук боялся выпустить. И получается, лег спать, на предохранитель не поставил, и в результате ночью, пока спал, застрелился.
I gotta say, with those kinds of officers leading the Russian infantry, I'm sure that the Ukrainians are going to have a very easy time pushing them back out. If you have that low of an intelligence rating to not put the safety on your gun and also aim the barrel straight under your chin while you're sleeping, I would of course face it downwards if I kept a gun with me, like, you know, more towards my crotch. I'd rather lose my crotch than my life. So, still, that is the kind of leadership quality that's in the Russian military, and that's not anything I would want to be under the command of. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see another M777 in use today on film. This is giving you a very good idea of how many M777s are being used by the Ukrainians, how much they're liking them.
Постріл! Зарядити!
What a gun. And the Ukrainians think it's an impressive gun as well. And so hopefully they continue to use it with great efficiency and also smack the living hell out of Russian units that are within its range. Once again, the United States, Estonia, Canada, Australia, and many other nations have provided the Ukrainians with M777s, although the United States has provided the largest amount. Hopefully all of them are put to good use, and hopefully all of them do bring good praise and good attributes to the countries that lended them. I was trying to think of the correct wordage there, and so we're now going to move on to something we haven't seen for a while on here. We haven't seen one of these in quite some time in the location unknown news category, but today we're seeing another Stugna attack video. The Ukrainians are still using these, and they are still wiping out Russian units across the entirety of the country. With that, here's the video.
Єсть!
We can now see the vehicle being hit.
Які працюють кожен день практично. Щось знищується. Практично, ну, я не знаю, відбили. Атаки відбивали також. Питалися проходити. Ну, не знаю, колони зупиняли. Там один зупинив, все, останні розбіглися. Далі арта, якщо добиває, от якраз хотіли йти, і хлопці знищили 2 танка, БТР і добили колону. Ну, це буквально недавно. Ночі працювали вже і фосфором, в нашу сторону працювали. Ну, в основному сюди гради, фосфор. Бувало,
we can now once again see a montage of the footage of white phosphorus being used on Ukrainian troops an incredibly long while ago.
Міномет, це 100% кожен день. Ну, такої стрілкотні мало, в основному все важке. Все важке просто закидають. Б'ють по квадратах. Сьогодні було тут 3 штуки. От сюди заїжджає один і заїжджає ще один. От тут стоїть, стріляють. Зараз, на даний момент, зараз стоїть так же само. От тут стоїть зараз БТР. Бачив дуло, як одлетіло? Мотивація сидіти і жони вдома. Оце сама головна мотивація. Скоріше виженемо, скоріше поїде.
That's the end of the video, but we can still see Stugna units being used in to great effectiveness and destroying Russian units all across the country. Once again, wonderful to see, and I hope that that kind of action done by the Stugna units will keep up through the entirety of the war. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see that the Ukrainians are going to bring back the bicycle units. This is something I think is incredible and also very interesting, because now we're seeing bicycles maybe making it back into the modern age of fighting. If you didn't know, in World War II, there was actually a decent amount of bicycle battalions across multiple different militaries. For example, the Danish used them, the French used them, among others. And so bicycles have been an effective way of making sure that infantry that otherwise did not have a motorized, well, any sort of motorized factor to them at the time, like trucks and such, could still move around at a much greater speed than walking could provide. So here we can now see that the Ukrainians have been provided with electric bikes that are capable of going 60 miles an hour. Now that is a fast bike. Here's the video. I'm surprised that this guy hasn't hit a rock and flown off yet, because whenever I'm on a bike and I'm going 20 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour, I'm always thinking about hitting a rock and flying off. I actually had a really bad bike wreck when I was a kid because I hit a rock and I went flying. I got teeth knocked out and everything. And also my face got kind of a little messed up, and I also have a scar still left on my nose from that. So I'm not a huge fan of going fast on bikes by any means, but this man is going all out. And so I have to give him a lot of praise for that, and hopefully these electric bikes that have been provided to the Ukrainians will be of great use and will help the infantry to move around at a much faster speed. I'm not really sure about the logistics of recharging these vehicles. I don't know if there's any functional areas with electricity near the front lines that these bikes can be charged at, but if that is not a problem that they're having to look into, these will be used to great effectiveness. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a firefight from a Ukrainian perspective. This is an incredibly interesting bit of film here. It lasts for many minutes, and it's almost first-person footage of what a Ukrainian soldier has been facing in one area of the front. I'm not going to continue for much longer. I'm just going to give a little bit of commentary as we go. Here's the video. You can hear the firefight raging in the distance, as it appears that this Ukrainian in particular has some kind of AKM. You still hear the firefight raging, and this is a very intense firefight. We can still hear that apparently sizable artillery shells are landing in the midst of this firefight based off of the sound of the explosions themselves. We can see that the soldier here on the clip is actually very calm and collected, although absolute hell is unfolding around him. We can now see another explosion rock behind him in the footage. We can now see another explosion unfold right behind them. This has to be the most intense firefight we've ever seen unfold on film, just by the sound of it alone. Also, what's interesting to me here, I'm going to pause the video, is that this man in front of us has a suppressor slash silencer, whatever you would like to call it, it's the same thing. But it's still very interesting to see that the Ukrainians have issued a sizable amount of suppressors over the course of this war. We've actually seen a lot of suppressors on film, and I do think that suppressors are a very worthy addition to most firearms, because it does mitigate the actual punching sound of the gun. It of course doesn't make it silent by any means. It's still kind of loud, but still it's not so harsh on the ears, and I'm sure that soldiers do find great comfort in knowing that they will not have tinnitus for a long time after a firefight. But based off of the sound in this firefight, I don't think that'll be the case in particular here. We can now see the explosion rocked incredibly close to the camera, knocking it down. We now see the Ukrainian soldier pick up the camera, and you can now see, based off of the dust floating around over them, that that explosion was nearly dead onto their position. I'm not sure if it's a tank firing at their trenches, or if it was an artillery shell that landed nearby, but that was dangerously close.
Едет. Фу. Куда едет? Довелся. Далеко, тут и далеко берешь.
When you see that the explosions have subsided for the moment, and it sounds like the firefight is dying down a little bit near the end of this film.
Туда. Вон, они там за забором.
And while we didn't see a lot of action on film of what was actually going on above the trench, just from the sound of it alone and the little bit we could see, these soldiers are in the middle of hell on earth. And it's very impressive to see how calm and collected they were throughout the entire thing, even when a shell or some kind of explosion blew up right above them on the berm of this trench. I have to say that the Ukrainian soldiers, every time we see them on film, time and time, impress me each and every single time, because even thinking in their shoes, if I was in their situation, I would not be as calm and collected as they are. I can tell you that for sure. I would be a mess. So I've got to say, every time we see the Ukrainians and the soldiers that are fighting for their country, you can tell they believe in their cause, because even through being in near-death situations like this, they are still dedicated to what they're doing and are all for the defense of their nation, unlike the Russians, which we'll see in situations like these running for the hills. So once again, an impressive bit of footage, and it does show you the valor, bravery, and stoic nature of the Ukrainian infantry. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see Ukrainian troops in their free time. This is, of course, a video of Ukrainians in their natural habitat, and I believe this is what Operator Starsky does in his free time as well. So it's a very interesting clip, and let's take a look at it. Here we can see them moving a javelin in its casing out of the back of a truck.
Все решта напередку. Це є залізний аргумент проти залізної броні. Ну, залізного танка в хорошій броні. Оце самий хороший аргумент.
Ми знаємо цю історію. Прилетіли ракети. We would like to get them more. Yeah, of course. Ну, наша протиповітряна оборона це їх.
We can see them taking a good look at the javelins, I think.
Недостатньо. Мало. Дуже мало, їх не вистачає. Хлопці вміють ними користуватися, користуються ефективно, але їх не вистачає.
Що, вже все з'їли?
Вже автомат мій знімів.
Отут достатньо місця. Грузяться ракети сюди, джавеліни, і вперед. Приїжджає 2-3 чоловіка, знищили ціль і на цій же ж машині і уїхали.
You can see that they're now having a little bit of food. It actually looks like good food, honestly. They're cooking pretty well out there. Like, let's take a look at that little dish here and let's see what they got in it. Looks like they got a little bit of sausage, maybe an egg. Oh, no, some fruit maybe. And some bread, it seems. Or something like it. So it looks like they kind of went for pineapple ham. Or something similar to it. Because I believe when we look at the start of this film, the can that this man's opening is some kind of pineapple, perhaps. But we'll go back and look at that again.
Скільки вже хлопців полягло. І все буде Україна.
So let's go back to the beginning of the video, because I'm really interested what that little yellow vegetable or fruit was in that dish. And let me read that can, if I can. Oh, man, what would that say? Okay, so it's A-I-A-I-A-S. If someone could get me a translation, and of course I'm saying what it sounds like in Ukrainian, not what the letters are in English. Ananas. How? Wait a minute, hang on. I think that may be a banana. Let's pull that up. How do you spell banana in Ukrainian? Banan. Okay, so it's not that. It's a pineapple. Okay, it is a pineapple. Everyone's saying now it is certainly a pineapple. Thank you very much, everyone, for letting me know it is in fact a pineapple. I was like, wow, what a weird way to spell banana. It's just missing the first letter. So with that, we can see that it was a pineapple along with some ham. Pretty solid choices there. And if they just had a pizza, they could make a pineapple pizza. I know that's going to also send the comments into a war as well. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Ukrainians not only had one buggy for the Chechens, they've now got an even cooler looking buggy called a VOLS for the 72nd Mechanized Brigade. This looks like something straight out of Mad Max. So I'm going to let y'all see this thing yourselves. And I'm sorry that the footage is a little bit like a slideshow. It's just like this. It's very weird. But I mean, this is one cool little buggy right here for sure. And you can also see that it has an ATGM mount on it to operate the launcher with and the rocket itself. And so this, it seems, is the new version of Technicals here in Modern War. Technicals used to be trucks like a Toyota Hilux, which is the most common example, that would have some kind of heavy machine gun or something similar mounted onto the back. Sometimes they would also mount rocket pods and anti-tank guided missiles to them, and that was the usual run-of-the-mill for an incredibly fast but quick and easy to use system that could lay down some kind of fire on enemy units, whether they be infantry, armored personnel carriers, tanks, or just a broad area like they would with a rocket launcher. Now we can see the Ukrainians have redefined the technical role, I guess you could say, from Toyota Hiluxes and other kinds of pickup trucks to now they're starting to use buggies, which I would say are even more suited to driving on off-road terrain. So a very interesting development as far as how technicals are sort of evolving. So I can't wait to see how effective this buggy is in combat, and we know that many others like it, mostly ATVs, are also being used at this moment. We'll be trying to keep an eye out for the news on how effective these are being used, and so we're going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see some Ukrainian forces and Russian forces throwing insults at each other over the radio. We actually have a speech-to-text translation at the bottom, and now it can be said that Modern War is just like Call of Duty. This sounds like a Call of Duty lobby way in the early days when people said whatever they wanted to, and so I'm just gonna let y'all see this. Of course, I will not repeat any of this because it's a little crazy, but here's the radio call with the speech to text at the bottom.
Нахуй пошел, что тут непонятно. Ребята, не занимайте круговую оборону, лучше сдавайтесь сразу, вам всем пизда! Ебало, сука, у тебя, чтоб ты понял, сейчас потихоньку джавелинами накроем вас, к ебаной матери! Тебе в жопу засунь, пидор ебаный! Это ты, пидор ебаный, ты на моей земле, там, блядь, будешь, сука, и кормить червей! Гандон ты ебаный! заебало, забей ты, ублюдок. Ты хуйло, блядь, брянское.
So, quite a heated exchange there in between the Russian forces and the Ukrainian forces, and you can see that modern war is just like the video games, at least in the radio calls that somehow are made in between both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side. So, with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see some Russian scrap. We're starting to see a large amount of this, and hopefully the Ukrainians will open up a brand new scrap metal market and be one of the largest exporters of scrap metal and metallic-like materials around the world. Here we can see an engine block that most likely came out of a T-72, considering that it does look like some kind of a diesel engine. I do believe the T-80s operate off of a gas turbine. Now we can see what's left of the T-72, or half of a T-72. Once again, impressive footage to see, and it's good to know the Ukrainians are obliterating Russian forces across the entirety of the front lines. We're now going to move to our last bit of location unknown news, where we can see a flying spider. And some of y'all may be wondering, why did I give this octocopter that name? Well, it kind of reminds me of a flying spider. And here in this picture, you can actually see a Russian armored personnel carrier. It appears to be some kind of BTR-80 here in this tree line, and an octocopter hovering right above it and pretty much stalking it. Very interesting to see, especially a picture of, and it does kind of give me the idea that this thing just looks like a large flying spider with 8 legs and dropping bomblets all over the place. We'll also be getting to a technological innovation we're seeing in the making right now to make the drones even more effective and allow them to carry even more bombs, but that'll be covered in the international news, so stick around if you would like to hear what innovations are being made in the destructive capability of these kinds of drones. With that, we've now reached the end of the location unknown news, and we're now going to start moving towards the Kharkiv area, where we have the large news for the night, talking about what the title and description is all about. So, before we move there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat, and then we're going to get straight into the Kharkiv news and the news around the Izium area. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
So, good afternoon, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. I see everybody's doing well in the chat, so that's good to hear. Again, if you have a question for us, please put it in the chat and tag @the-enforcer, and we'll try to answer it before the stream ends tonight. So first up, we have a $30 donation from Douglas Murphy, who does not leave a comment, and also a $22 donation from Edward Curl, who also does not leave a comment. So thank you very much to both of you. I'm going to let the Enforcer take it from here.
And I thank you both so much for the support. It does help out this channel a whole load. And I know that everyone's heard this, so I'm going to kind of keep it a little bit short. I know that y'all know how much I appreciate it, but it does help us to keep going. And this is the only way we make sure that we can keep running these streams, keep the lights on, and keep ourselves fed is through y'all's support. So thank you so much once again. It helps us out a whole load. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question. But before we do, I'm actually going to answer a question I've seen a couple of times in chat. Some people have been asking, is Operator Starsky going to be on tomorrow? And the answer, before I get to the answer, let me explain when he will be coming on. Starsky is not going to be coming on this Sunday. He's going to be coming on next Sunday. The reason why I pushed him back, because the original plan was to have him on this Sunday, is because we have another large channel that's also covering war news and information from around the world who will be joining us that Sunday night. The channel I'm talking about is Funker530. Funker530 will be joining us on the stream that night to try and fundraise as much as possible. So hopefully we can get a load of people from Funker530's community over here to help fundraise, and we can get Operator Starsky's people over here to fundraise, and the Leaf Spring Army once again will be pushing from the front and making sure that this objective is achieved to the T. So with that, Operator Starsky will not be coming on this Sunday. He'll be coming on next Sunday, and we also have even larger ambitions as to the guests we'll be bringing on for the Sunday night fundraisers. But for now, that's in the making, and I don't want to say too much about it. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Chris Mack, who says, "So appreciating all of your hard work, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt and the mods. Ukrainian military brass states a coup is already underway in Russia to displace Putin. What do you think?"
I have not heard about that, and I'm not sure if that's a recent development that has occurred within the last hour or during the stream, because I sadly cannot really keep up with the news like T-minus 1 hour before the stream, because I'm doing a whole bunch to set this thing up and get it ready to go. So, with that in mind, let's type in Russian coup, and let's see if we're getting any news. 12 hours ago, 9 hours ago, Interesting. This was about 12 hours ago. I haven't heard anything about it. Coup is underway. Let's see. Interesting. According to Fortune.com, there is a coup that is underway. I have not heard any information about this, and it has been around 12 hours. Actually, it's been a day, according to the Daily Mail, and we haven't heard anything about this, and we haven't heard of any progress. Usually, coups are incredibly quick, usually occurring over the course of a few hours, so there's usually discernible and clear news that the coup has either been successful or failed. So, I'm not exactly sure if this is happening. We will, of course, try and keep a good eye out on the news and see if it did occur. And if it has, we will, of course, be reporting on that most likely tomorrow once the news of the coup actually reaches the world and whether it was successful or not. If it was not successful, we're not going to hear about it. So I thank you very much for bringing that up, and I actually did not know about that at all going into tonight's stream. It's just something that never popped up on any of my radars. So with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for sharing that information with us so that way we can make sure to have a heads up and keep apprised of that situation if it is actually developing. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and the info, and we're going to move on to the last question of this question section, and then we're going to move into the Kharkiv and Izium area.
Last question of this segment goes to Zybersniper1, who puts in a $15 donation and says, if World War III starts and Russia attacks my country, meaning Norway, who would win? My Viking axe / tomahawk or the Russian Kinjal sword 1v1? LOL. And I am willing to give my life for my country.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's always wonderful to hear that people are incredibly proud of their country. There's always, of course, and this is kind of my opinion on, like, one thing, you know, if I give my opinion on anything, there's always stuff in every single country that people cannot be proud about and people can complain about and say that's not great and all that stuff. But there's so much in every single country that every single person can be proud for. I mean, like, every country in the world has something special going for it, and the Norwegians are no exception. I'm so happy to hear that you are very proud of your country and that you're proud to be a Norwegian. The sentiments of not being proud of one's country is a very common thing around the world, but I just believe that's because people hear so much doom and gloom, and they don't hear about all the wonderful things that happen in their country. So that's kind of my opinion on that, but it's wonderful to hear that you are a huge patriot of your nation, and I have to say, Norway has an incredibly interesting history throughout the entirety of it, from start to finish. Even through the eras that people thought nothing was really going on in Norway, stuff was certainly going on. Specifically, I'm thinking about the Blucher, I believe it was, being sunk on its way through the Oslo Strait near the Askerborg Fortress. That was, of course, an incredibly interesting part of modern Norwegian history. But anyways, if Norway was to be attacked, of course, it's a NATO country, so that would invoke Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which will lead the entirety of NATO to go to war with Russia. To answer the question in an incredibly short way, based off of how well the Russians are doing in Ukraine, committing around a third of their army to this war, I could give you a fairly good idea that they wouldn't be able to stand up to Norway on its own, pretty much less the entirety of NATO weighing in on the situation and pushing their entire force straight into Russia. We know that Belarus would probably stay neutral, so the actual shared front line in between Russia and NATO would be entirely here on the northern part of Norway, which is incredibly interesting that you brought that up, near Murmansk. That may be a small front line. I'm not sure if they'd be able to supply that incredibly well logistically, considering that it's so far north, and also there's a large Russian fleet based off the area near Arkhangelsk or Murmansk itself. So I'm not sure if logistically that would be possible for it to be a major front line for NATO. But down here in the Baltics, that would certainly become a major point of contention in a war if World War III was to break out in between NATO and Russia. And to suffice it to say, NATO in a land war would completely annihilate the Russians. Now, in a nuclear war, no one wins. So, you know, that's kind of like the great equalizer there. But at the same time, when you're talking about a ground war in between NATO and Russia, there's no chance. There's no chance for the Russians. For example, take the United States alone. If all of NATO was just to go, we're going to support the United States with our industrial capacity, which is kind of the wrong way around. Usually it's the United States doing that for other countries. But let's just say if that was the case. The United States has, I believe, around 11 operational aircraft carriers. Don't hold me to that. They've been decommissioning aircraft carriers and also commissioning new ones. So I don't know the exact number as of the moment. But we have 11 aircraft carriers. Each one fields around 70 aircraft. So that is around 700 aircraft that can be fielded at any given area in Western Europe that isn't being based at an airfield. On top of that, we know that the United States has probably at least 100 or more air bases and military bases within Europe itself. Most of those are in Germany. And so based off of the air power alone, the United States would be toe-to-toe with the Russians, and that's not even pulling on the thousands of aircraft that are based around the world and in the United States. So in the air war, NATO would win 100% just by the United States alone. Then moving into the ground area of the war, the United States has a $660 billion budget. It's now gotten up to around $700 billion, I believe, which is massive. To put that into perspective, the Russians' annual military budget is 10% of that. So just based off of the funding that the U.S. military has alone, economically, they would crush the Russians. There's no way that the Russians could actually maintain a sizable fighting force that is well kept and competent enough to actually face the Americans head to head. Putin knows that as well. He actually said something very similar to that in a speech in 2015, and he said the whole entire thing that Russia relies on in the modern world is not its military, but it's the nuclear arsenal, and that's the only way to defend themselves from being attacked by outside powers, considering that they're actually so weak. So I hope that does answer the question. I actually went down the rabbit hole there, although I said I was going to make it a little bit short. So I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, at least in a superficial way, about if World War III was to break out, what would happen. And so that is the end of this question segment. I thank you all once again so much for the support. If you did send in a live chat, don't worry, we will get to them to the by the end of the night. And just for everyone to know, again, just to be as clear as possible, super chats support this channel. If you would like to support Ukraine, we do run a Sunday fundraiser, which will be tomorrow, where we pick a nonprofit that is operating Ukraine, and I highly recommend that you throw everything you've got at these fundraisers. They're the pride of this channel. We love doing them. It's kind of the hallmark of what we do. It's a weekly event, and so I hope if you do anything, whether you support this channel or not, you come back tomorrow and support that fundraiser the best you can. We right now have someone who is setting records here on the channel who's called Naria, who sends in thousands of dollars every single time we run a Sunday night fundraiser. So if you want to be remembered, be like Naria and throw in thousands of dollars to wonderful nonprofits like the Red Cross, the UNHCR, I get that mixed up so much in my head, Doctors Without Borders, Mercy Corps, Razom for Ukraine, and dozens of, well, actually several others, not dozens, it's around 7 of them that we've supported previously. So with that, I thank you all once again for your support, and we're now going to return once again to the news in the Kharkiv region. Now, this is a part where everyone will need to pay attention. If you're paying attention to any news segment tonight, this is the most important one. It has now been confirmed that what I'm saying for the past few days has now been confirmed as true. The Russians have been dealt major blows here in the Kharkiv area that will be unrecoverable, and they've completely, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, ceased all offensive activities, and they're now entirely focused on stopping the hemorrhaging of Russian forces and territory north of Kharkiv. This was once again further compounded way earlier on, about a week and a half ago, when Ukrainian forces broke the Russian lines east of Kharkiv and sent them into total chaos and collapse, where the Ukrainians pushed out the Stary Saltiv and then immediately began a counterattack north along the western bank of the Donetsk River to the Russian border. Within a matter of days, they reached the Russian border, and the situation was known to be collapsing at that point, with the Russian forces and the DPR and LPR forces within this pocket now completely cut off from the rest of the front lines further to the southeast, unless if they were to go through Russia. With this in mind, Russian forces are now being withdrawn from this area, as the actual ability for the Russians to continue any more offensive actions is completely non-existent. They will now be on the defensive in this area until they're completely withdrawn. The DPR and LPR forces that were with the Russians that I've mentioned prior in this little discussion here and kind of explanation of what's going on were also in this pocket when they got completely cut off of everything east of the Donetsk. They are now trying to withdraw from this pocket and try and move back to the DPR and LPR region, but they've now been stopped at the border by Russian forces who have threatened that if they attempt to cross the border from Ukraine to Russia, the Russian soldiers will fire upon the DPR and LPR troops and kill them. Here in this video, we can see this betrayal at the border occurring, where DPR and LPR troops are just stuck, sitting around, trying to figure out what to do now that there's no way out for them.
Передаю привет всем, кто с Луганской Народной Республики. Наблюдается такая картина. Весь батальон отошел с позиций, и его не выпускают с Российской Федерации.
We can now see him pan around to all the DPR and LPR troops who are just sitting at the border.
Что делать, мы не знаем, так как нас не выпускают.
Wait a minute, was that guy wearing Enforcer merch? No, he's not. It looked like it, though.
Так как нас не выпускают, грозятся тюрьмой, расстрелом и так далее.
Now the video loops, but one thing I'd like to say is that when you look at these soldiers right here on film, you can tell that they're all sitting under this gondola, or if you like to call it a gazebo, that's actually the right name for it. They're all sitting under this gazebo, and they're thinking, wow, we've been fighting for the wrong side this entire time. And that's even if the DPR and LPR troops we're seeing here in this video had a choice if they wanted to fight or not. We know that the DPR and LPR kind of go under a bushwhacking kind of philosophy where they just go through the villages and towns and they just pick men to go and fight. So I'm not even sure if these men had a choice in who they were fighting for, but now you know that they're thinking, we are up, for lack of a better term, shit creek without a paddle. And now we've been betrayed by everyone. We've been betrayed by the Russians, we're being betrayed by our own command, and we're going to be stuck here to die. There's no way out for them anymore. They can't go through Ukraine. Of course, they would have to fight the Ukrainians to try and pass through there to the next part of the line near the Donetsk River, and then they'd have to fight with the Ukrainian forces on the western bank of the Donetsk to then try and cross a bridge, which would be suicidal, to reach the other side and rejoin their forces. That's not an option. They cannot go through Russia. They'll be killed by Russian forces if they try, and so these men right here have been assigned to their fate, and their fate is death. And we can now see that the Russians have also betrayed them. So if anyone is watching from the DPR and LPR, know this. The Russians are not your friends either. These soldiers right here are a great example of what the Russians will do once the situation is no longer attainable for them. They're going to just abandon y'all. And so it's very interesting to me that the DPR and LPR continue to fight at all in the Donbass region. I believe that if the DPR and LPR troops were able to see this information and see what's happening to them outside of their own republics, they would pretty much go into straight mutinies, knowing that the Russians are only using them as pawns and want nothing to do with them beyond that. That also brings into question a whole bunch of other stuff. The Russians aren't even going to help out the Russian-speaking forces that live within Ukraine. So what is their real goal? You know their goal isn't anymore to try and get all the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine under the Russian flag. They could care less about the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. So what is the actual goal? Like, there is no goal at this point. It seems like it's been a pointless war from the start. Now it certainly seems like a pointless war, now that they're not even going to help out their own, quote-unquote, Russian-speaking brothers. That's insane. So with that, you can now see why this video had the title it did tonight. It's not clickbaity, it's literally truth. The Russians are betraying their own allies at the border. We're now going to move further down to the front and show that these soldiers' time is going to be limited, as the Russians have once again been taking heavy losses in the area, as the Ukrainians have been conducting successful counterattacks around this entire pocket that the Russian forces now have north of Kharkiv. Here we can see a destroyed minesweeper on film. You can see something of a crater near the tank that is smoldering and burning, and you can see that this tank is largely intact, but the crew has abandoned the tank as the hatches are open. The gunner and the commander's hatch is open. Very good video to see, and it's good to know that the Russian pocket here will not last long. Moving on down the front, we can see down in the area of Ruski Tishki that an ammo depot has exploded, further hindering Russian logistical efforts in the area, as the ammunition that was in this ammo depot that they set up near the front lines is no longer usable, and the ammo that they will need will have to be trucked in from an area further away. As you can see here, a Ukrainian soldier is pressing on through the field, and the fire is smoldering and burning out in the distance. Unfortunately, I couldn't play the audio. It did have copyrighted music, but the Ukrainians continue to gain land, and with that, the Kharkiv chapter has pretty much closed. You're watching the last page of the Battle of Kharkiv being written right here in this time of history. The Russians have completely failed on all of their objectives that they started out this war with, and there were only two: to take Kyiv or besiege Kyiv, and to take Kharkiv and besiege it as well. We've seen them fail on both of them now. And so, y'all are watching history being made right here. The Ukrainians have thwarted the original Russian invasion plans to perfection. There is no chance that the Russians will ever be able to rebound in the Kharkiv area or the northern front, and we've now had confirmed proof and evidence that the Russians have completely abandoned any idea of once again pursuing a northern front. With that, we're now going to move further down the line, and I'm once again going to state, as usual, that we've heard of no action near the Pachinahi area or the Chuhuiv area in general. There has not been a heavy amount of fighting here for an incredibly long time. I believe that both sides are kind of remaining static in their movements, especially since the Donetsk River makes up around half of this front line. So, of course, we'll be trying to keep out some news here. There is a lot of potential on either side for massive gains to be made that would be of detriment to the other. And with that, we're now going to move further down the line to the area of Izium. The fighting largely has subsided in the Izium area, as it appears that the Russian commanders and forces down here in this part of the front have seen that any sort of breakthrough is futile because there's just no chance of it. Here in this video, we can see that there were some Russians active near Izium today, but this is one of the few examples of Russian forces being active anywhere in the area, as far as I've been able to tell, and according to official Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reports, the fighting has largely subsided in this area, as it appears that the Russians are trying to regroup or trying and manage to mitigate their casualties by stopping the fighting for some time. But here's the video. Supposedly, this is a video of Russian infantry and also their armored personnel carriers attacking the Ukrainians near a pontoon bridge that they erected somewhere in the area of Izium, although we're not really sure about that information of there being a pontoon bridge nearby. We just know that this was in the area of Izium. We can now see one of the BMP-3s moving on. And we can now see some drone footage, supposedly from the Russian forces, of what appears to be a pontoon bridge down there that is having artillery shells landing around it. Once again, this could actually be Ukrainian footage of drone strikes, and the Russians are claiming it as their own, because we've actually seen them do that with some Snake Island footage that was made by the Ukrainians, and then they claimed it to be their own. We're now going to move on further down the line towards the village of Oskil, where today we've seen some more vehicles being destroyed by the 95th Air Assault Brigade. Here we can see a decent little pile of them. It appears that there were 4 APCs here, 1 BMP-2, and several BTRs that were destroyed. Of course, of different variants, it seems. 2 BTR-82s, and maybe a BTR-80 or a BTR-60. Of course, I have to keep the video muted because it does have copyright music. Just want to make sure. But it looks like, by and large, most of the BTR crews were able to bail out of their vehicles without them taking any damage. It looks like the only vehicle in this group that took any kind of damaging blow or was completely destroyed was the BMP-2 in the center of this quote-unquote formation. Now we can see a destroyed Russian T-72B3 tank. It appears that the track and the whole entire front left side of the wheel set was completely destroyed, along with most of the suspension most likely on the left side of the tank, leaving it completely disabled where the crew then bailed out. The tank did not burn out. We don't see any significant evidence of burns across the tank, and so we know that the crew most likely survived and then abandoned the tank. With that in mind, we can see that another BTG has taken some considerable losses. This one tank alone accounts for 10% of the fighting force of main battle tanks in a single BTG. That means that a BTG has been depleted of 10% of its main battle tank force. Not only that, but of all of the armored personnel carriers we saw earlier in the video, the 4 of them were from a BTG. That means that that BTG has also lost around, I believe, let me actually do the math on that so I can get appropriate estimation here. Let's see, 4 divided by 13% of their armored personnel carrier force lost in one area of the road, and most of it due to abandonment and desertion by the crew. With that, we can see that in the Izium area, the Russians are slowing down their fighting in this area in particular, but it doesn't appear like it'll be doing them much good. The Ukrainians will most likely take advantage of the situation and begin to conduct counterattacks against Izium, which will put the Russians in a very precarious situation here in this area of the front, and will most likely jeopardize their entire offensive, considering that most of their forces are in the area of Izium, and also, from what we could tell by the SIM card map, down here in the area south of Kryvyi Rih. With that, we have now reached the end of this segment. While it may be short, I do want to make sure to answer 3 questions from the chat before we move on to the rest of the Donbass news, the Southern news, and then the international news. And so, with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and next up, we have a $50 donation from Susan G, who says, I trust news from the Enforcer and Operator Starsky. I appreciate hearing President Zelenskyy report and message every day.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I am glad that you do enjoy to hear President Zelenskyy speak every single day. That's something that we do include on our stream, and I think it's a wonderful touch and a great addition that we added here, because it does give you an idea of what the very top of the Ukrainian leadership is thinking. Also, just to key y'all in a little bit, that is someone that well, not someone, that is that's one of the people we're eyeballing to be a guest star here on the stream, although the chances of that, I'm going into this thinking, are somewhat low. But the worst answer we could get is no, and so far, we've never gotten a no as an answer from anyone we've asked to come on the stream. Hopefully he would. I think that it would be a great help to the Sunday night fundraisers, and it would reach an audience that is a massive supporter of the war in Ukraine, and also huge fans of his leadership style, particularly in the state of emergency. But we can only dream, and of course, we'll try and hold out on that dream as long as possible until we either get a yes or no answer. So, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, I want to recognize 2 donations without comments. We have a $25 donation from Charles Gregor and a $20 donation from Homer Lapgard. Thank you very much to both of you for your support. That's very generous of you, and they help us to run the channel. So, unfortunately, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I would. Of course, I want to let y'all know that y'all's support helps out this channel a whole load. Once again, I usually like questions, and of course, I'm not like saying that I'm not satisfied with them or anything. I'm more than happy for all the support that anyone gives, but I wish I could give you something in return for your support, like answering a question or something like that. But I guess that you find it good enough that the streams run and you're just happy for them. So I thank you so much for the support. It does help us to keep on doing these streams nightly because it helps us to, pretty much survive. And so thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment and then return to the news covering the Southern Front, international news, and the address from the president. And so on to the last question.
And the last one of this segment goes to Zyper Sniper 1 again, who puts in another $15 donation and says, looks like this war is just Call of Duty in real life for the Russians. Give them hell, Ukraine.
I agree, and I thank you very much for adding on to the joke there, specifically over the radio chat. Now, that was something that if you watch very early on, like 2010 videos of the war, well, not the war in Ukraine, of Call of Duty, that sounded almost like a Call of Duty lobby. So, gotta say, that was really interesting to hear, and I do think it's like Call of Duty for the Russians, because in Call of Duty, the Russians never went the Russians never won anything. Yeah, that would be the correct way to say that. Except in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, well, no, Call of Duty World at War, of course, where it was portraying the battles that were fought in World War II. Of course, the Soviets as a whole won there, and of course, that's mostly due because a large amount of the Russian armed forces were made up of Ukrainians at the time, which is an interesting fact. But I do thank you very much for the support. I hope I did address that comment pretty well, and your support helps us to continue on running this channel. Every time I say that, just for y'all to know, I feel like I'm PBS. You know how they sit there and say, you help this channel run, you know, and they're pretty much talking about how your tax dollars keep PBS running. That's kind of how I feel doing that. But still, it's very true. Y'all are the people who help me to keep on grinding these gears and keeping these streams running, because I don't have to worry about giving up this whole thing and having to go and get a job, because this has become my job. So with that, I thank you all so much for the support once again, and we're now going to move on to the rest of the news from around the world, and then finally wrap up with the speech from President Zelenskyy. Moving on to the news near the Rubizhny-Severodonetsk area as a whole, we can see a Tor anti-air system being used by the Russians, specifically by the O designated group. We can now see the surface-to-air missile being fired. And the missile is still traveling, and it appears that it's exploded somewhere in the distance, but we're not sure what it was being targeted at. Whether it was being targeted at a drone or some kind of aircraft, we could not tell. I'm believing it was most likely a drone, considering we didn't see any kind of a smoldering wreck of an aircraft flying towards the ground, which is what you usually see when an aircraft is hit. So I believe if it did hit anything, it was most likely a drone. We're now going to move closer to the area of Liman, where today we've seen Ukrainian artillery at work. This is actually a D-30 artillery system, and this crew is working with incredible pace. I have seen some people in the comments on this Reddit post saying, is that a kid? I don't think so. I think that's just kind of a thinner built person, to say the least. But anyways, here's the video. And they are firing that piece at lightning speed. And it's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians actually pump out the rounds when they're operating their pieces, unlike the Russians, who every single time on film we see them using actual towed artillery pieces, they operate them incredibly slowly. I think that may be because most of it's for propaganda purposes. And if it is, then that means it's most likely not being fired at anything that matters. Because if you're firing that slow with an artillery piece like we see on Russian film, you're not doing any kind of damage. You're not actually doing anything effective. We're now going to move on towards the area of Severodonetsk itself, where today we've actually corrected the location of that bridge, where 2 BTGs were wiped out entirely, and we actually have some follow-up film that was released today of those attacks on that pontoon bridge. Here we can see a video from the slaughter at the Donetsk bridge. Of course, very interesting to see, because it shows you to a great degree what some people were talking about on my channel. Some people were saying, oh, they don't need the bridge, they could just put snorkels on the tanks, and the BMPs are amphibious. And I understand what they were saying, but at the same time, imagine the amount of time it takes to waterproof the BMP, because I'm very sure that it can't just drive straight into a river immediately. It has to have some kind of waterproofing occur before it does. Otherwise, they may sink. I do think that there's a process for that, but I'm not entirely sure. And so, if you think about the amount of time to prepare each individual vehicle to do some kind of wading operation over this river, it's not time effective. And so laying out a pontoon bridge and putting out that time first, putting up that time first, and then allowing the rest of the vehicles that need to cross it, allowing them to just cross it without having to put in any additional time themselves to prepare to cross this area is much more efficient. But here we can actually see that one BMP-2 actually did hit the water and was kind of just floating around the area of the wreckage, much like a small boat. So I'm going to let y'all see the video. Here we can see the BMP-2 floating around in the water. And when you see a little bit of smoke coming off the top left area of the screen, we're not particularly sure where that was from. I'm not sure if that was a brand new explosion that occurred or some kind of vehicle that is cooking off. Can't really tell. That may actually be some kind of smoke screen that they're kind of trying to lay out in a way. Now you can see the massive Russian vehicles that have been destroyed all over the field. It's giving you a really good idea that nothing really went well for the Russians in this area, and I believe that this little BMP crew that's taking a swim in the river is kind of seeing that for themselves, that as far as the river crossing operation for the Russians in this area, it was not a good idea to say the least. We can actually see an artillery shell landing in the river right by the BMP. We can now see one of the crew members right there. He actually jumped off of the BMP, as you can see right here. He splashes into the water, and this man is trying to beat Michael Phelps in the swimming competition on trying to reach this shoreline. So we can actually tell that these little white plumes of smoke are apparently from the artillery shells that the Ukrainians are launching, and that may mean that this vehicle was hit off camera and is now on fire. Actually, that does look like a smoke system up there because it's continuously emitting a steady stream. So I'm going to correct that statement, but we do know that the smoke down here was from artillery fire. With that, that is the end of the video, but you can see there, wonderful progress by the Ukrainians, and you can see that even after the large amount of strikes that occurred near the bridge, wiping out those two BTGs, they still continue to attack the forces that were nearby and surveying the damage, trying to inflict as much casualties on the Russians as possible, and it appears that they succeeded. Moving on to the next clip we've gotten, we have a much shorter clip showing this bridge attack from another perspective. This time, it looks like the bridge was actually intact, so this tells us that this was much earlier in the process of the Ukrainians attacking this bridge. And here we can see some tanks on the other side of this bridge and an artillery shell landing right beside it. I mean, right beside it. That's the end of the video, but we do know the result of that incoming artillery fire is that it completely destroyed the pontoon bridge and wiped out two BTGs entirely, which is massive news. We're now going to move on from this area, and we're now going to move to the area nearby Rubizhny, where we can see some Chechens near Severodonetsk. I'm going to let y'all see this video. This was actually included in the summary today of the Enforcer short clips, but nonetheless, here's the video. We can tell that this man is some kind of new level Jason Bourne, some kind of next level fighter, the new Rambo. Look at this man as he looks at the camera and continues to spray his gun with wild abandon at nothing. Look at this. He thinks he looks cool, but he just doesn't know yet that he'll be needing those 5 extra rounds of ammunition once the Ukrainians start to overrun his position, and he'll not have them because he used them in a propaganda flick. We can now see that the Russians can't even hide and the Chechens can't even hide, being the TikTok stars they are, the losses they're taking. We can now see a wounded man, or maybe even a dead man, we're not entirely sure, but he's being carted away by his comrades off the field because he is no longer in fighting worthy condition. So you see him being carried off, and as the camera pans back around, actually it looks like there may be a second one. There's the second one. So it looks like their little propaganda flick here was actually interrupted by the reality of what's happening, and that's that the Chechens are actually taking a decent amount of casualties. Right there we saw 2 guys on film that will no longer be in this front line, as they're going to be sent back to Russia or somewhere off the front lines for medical attention, and then most likely to be discharged and sent to wherever they came from. So you can see right there that this little propaganda flick of Mr. Rambo here means nothing. Hang on, let me go back. Rambo didn't mean a thing because you just saw what was actually happening behind him as far as how the actual unit was faring in combat. We're now going to move on past Severodonetsk. We have, of course, not gotten a lot of news from the area today. It seems that the fighting, at least as far as video evidence has gone to show, is subsiding for a decent amount, at least on the eastern and southern sides of Severodonetsk. While up here on the northwestern side, it looks like the fighting is raging on as hard as normal, and it does look like we can confirm that the Russians are still trying to encircle Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in the exact same area I highlighted a week before the actual offensive began. So incredibly interesting to see that the Russians are a highly predictable fighting force. That's something that we've seen over the past 3 months of war, and so hopefully our predictions can continue to remain correct on the Russians, because it's just funny to see them do such a predictable thing, such as trying to push through Rubizhny and then around Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. With that, we're now going to move further down the front into the Luhansk region as a whole, where we can see that an MTLB was once again destroyed by a Stugna. Once again, wonderful to see that the Stugna anti-tank units are operating, and here's the footage. As we can see, the Stugna has now been launched and is on its way towards the MTLB. And dead on hit, destroying the MTLB and making sure that the Russians will no longer be able to use that one in particular. It's wonderful to see that the Ukrainians still are operating those Stugnas like a well-oiled machine. We're now going to move further down the front, past Luhansk and down into Mariupol itself. We haven't gotten any news from the Donetsk area today, and I'm not really sure what that is suggesting, but as far as video evidence, we don't have any in the Donetsk area today. In Mariupol, we only have one bit of film, and it's not even from the ground, it's actually from the air, and I'm not really sure what this is suggesting either. The Russians aren't showing any more footage from the area showing that they are succeeding in their objectives, which tells me that the situation is not good for them. However, the Ukrainians are also not uploading footage. This means one of two things. Either both sides are not uploading videos for some other reason rather than what I'm believing, or the Ukrainians are actually pushing the Russians back out of the defensive perimeter, and they no longer want to show videos of what's going on, because it could key in the Russians to their locations within the Azovstal. I'm not really sure which one it would be, but as of the moment, we'll just have to wait and see if we can get some more news to clear up the image of what's going on in this area. With that, we can see an Su-24 from the Russian Air Force bombing Mariupol. Unfortunately, that video has now been removed. So sadly, I won't be able to show you all that, but you could actually see cockpit footage, and then the camera panned downwards to look at the Azovstal steel plant, and there was a brief flash from a bomb exploding in the middle of the night that the Su-24 dropped, and that was the end of the video. It was very short. It was only around an 8 to 9 second video, so y'all didn't miss too much, but still, it's showing us, as far as the Russians being able to upload any video footage of what's going on the ground, and the Ukrainians as well, that the situation may be turning in Ukraine's favor, or it may be status quo like it much was before, and the Azov is struggling to hold their defensive positions within the Azovstal now that the defensive perimeter around the entire plant has been breached. We will, of course, have to wait for more news to see how it's actually unfolding, but we're now going to move on way down the southern front. We've got no news today of what's occurring near Zaporizhia, what's occurring inside of the Kryvyi Rih pocket or near Kherson. The only thing we've gotten today was from Mykolaiv, and it wasn't even of an artillery barrage or anything like that. We saw that Ukrainian air defense forces shot down another Su-34 tactical bomber near Mykolaiv. Here you can see the smoldering remains of this aircraft as it's sitting charred on the ground, and you can tell it's an Su-34, although the caption on this Reddit post isn't entirely sure, because the front nose cone is much more angular and flat than the Su-30, which would have a much more rounded nose cone, if that makes sense. Here's the video of this burning Su-34.
Так говорит 50 миллионов. ВВС России долетались. Николаев — это сила.
Wonderful to see that Russian aircraft are burning on the ground. We know that there will never be a replacement for this aircraft, as the sanctions have completely stopped the Russian war industry in its tracks, and they've no longer been able to produce new arms and equipment to continue on the war effort on their end. We're now going to move out of the country and way south, and I am talking as south as it goes, to the South Pole, actually, in Antarctica. Now, you're wondering, probably, where in the world does Antarctica come into play? No country even exists in Antarctica. And beyond the penguin jokes that we get every once in a while on this channel about the penguin army making its way up to Ukraine, in all seriousness, there is nothing in Antarctica. But we can actually see that there is a Ukrainian expedition that is still inside of Antarctica at one of the research bases that is giving their support to the defenders of Mariupol. And so I want to show you this clip because it's incredibly impressive that there is a Ukrainian contingent of scientists here in Antarctica, and they are also showing their support now on video of the war. We haven't seen anything like this before, and so here's the video.
Захисники Маріуполя. Ми команда 27-ї української антарктичної експедиції підтримуємо кожного українського воїна, що боронить наші рубежі на території Азовсталі.
Ми цінуємо і пишаємось вашою військовою доблестю, відданістю народу України, незламністю, що за межею людських можливостей.
Щомиті ви в думках і серцях кожного із нас. Станція Академік Вернадський з вами. Антарктида з вами. Увесь світ з вами.
Маріуполь – це Україна!
Now I'm going to have to mute this because it has copyrighted music, but now you can see a compilation of the damage and destruction that has occurred over Mariupol and some of the defenders that are still inside of the Azovstal. As you can see, the support from Ukrainians is unanimous around the entire world and the international communities of Ukrainians, and now even in the Arctic research bases of the Ukrainians that are there as well. And it's wonderful to see that wherever Ukrainians go, they carry the support of they carry the patriotism of their nation with them and support them still, even in such far-flung regions as Antarctica. We're now going to return back to Europe, where we have our last bit of news from internationally, and then we're going to go to the speech from President Zelenskyy. Here in the Netherlands today, we're starting to see that modern warfare will be heading in the direction of the drone. We've now seen that technology is being developed to create a more efficient and effective drone capable of carrying a higher bomb yield for the most part, and also being able to deliver it more effectively. Here we can see innovation in progress. This is some kind of circular cradle, a cylindrical cradle that is holding a series of bombs, kind of like a revolver. In theory, and as we will see in this video, this revolving cylinder will spin and then drop the bomblets out of the bottom. It seems to be a much more efficient system to carry bombs as far as drones are concerned, and will hopefully allow drones to continue on with their missions for a longer amount of time and allow them to deliver more ordnance on target. Here's a video of this system in action. A very interesting system indeed, and I hope that we see a large amount of progress and a large amount of production of these units and see them effectively used by the Ukrainians against the Russians in their war of defense of their nation. With that, we have now reached the end of the international news and the news of the war in general for the day. We're now going to wrap out our news with a speech from President Zelenskyy as usual, and as soon as the speech concludes, we will be going into the question segment and answering everyone's questions that have sent in one from the live chat, and also as many live chat questions as we can. With that, here is the address from the President of Ukraine, President Zelenskyy.
Мудрі народи нашої найсміливішої країни, усі захисники і захисниці. Минулого року, 14 травня, в нашій державі вперше відзначався День пам'яті українців, які рятували євреїв під час Другої світової війни. 2659 українців та українок отримали звання праведників народів світу. Наша країна четверта у світі за кількістю праведників. Людей, які ризикували своїм життям своїх рідних, але все одно рятували тих, кому загрожувала неминуча смерть від рук нацистів. Рятували дітей, дорослих, цілі родини. Кожна з таких історій порятунку вражає сміливістю, бо навколо було тотальне зло, а люди все одно зберігали добро в своєму серці. Вражає вірою у те, що людяність все одно переможе попри тодішню окупацію і силу нацистів. Праведники були в усіх регіонах нашої держави. Від Закарпаття до Криму, від Одеси до Харкова. І ще далеко не про всі історії порятунку ми знаємо. Було багато і тих, хто просто не встиг розповісти, завдяки кому зберіг життя. Рятували і зовсім маленьких дітей, які просто не могли розуміти, що насправді з ними відбувається. Ми маємо завжди згадувати, що у нашого народу є такі праведники, і що навіть у найтемніших обставинах знаходяться люди, які несуть світло. Саме таке прагнення до добра ми бачимо і зараз в українців, в українках, які допомагають рятувати наших людей від окупантів, від таких самих нацистів. Я вдячний усім журналістам і просто усім небайдужим людям, які документують сучасні історії порятунку, фіксують для усіх поколінь нашого народу, через що доводиться пройти Україні, і як люди проявляють свої найкращі якості, рятуючи інших, знайомих і незнайомих, рідних, чужих, дітей, дорослих, всіх. Провів сьогодні у Києві переговори з делегацією сенаторів США на чолі з лідером республіканської меншості в Сенаті Мітчеллом МакКоннеллом. Вважаю, що цей візит вкотре демонструє міцність двопартійної підтримки нашої держави, потужність зв'язку між українським та американським народами. Обговорили різні напрямки підтримки нашої держави, зокрема оборону і фінансову, а також і посилення санкцій проти Росії. Подякував за історичне рішення про поновлення програми Ленд-лізу, закликав офіційно визнати Росію державою-терористом. Одне з питань, яким займаюся фактично щоденно, це продовольча безпека. Все більше держав світу усвідомлюють, що Росія, заблокувавши для нас Чорне море і продовжуючи цю війну, ставить десятки інших країн перед загрозою цінової кризи на ринку продовольства і навіть голоду. Це ще один стимул для нашої антивоєнної коаліції діяти більш рішуче разом. Зараз підтримка для України і передусім зброєю означає роботу на недопущення глобального голоду. Чим швидше ми звільнимо нашу землю і гарантуємо Україні безпеку, тим швидше може відновитись нормальний стан продовольчого ринку. Ситуація на Донбасі залишається дуже важкою. Російські війська досі намагаються показати хоча б якусь перемогу. На 80-й день повномасштабного вторгнення це виглядає особливо божевільно, але вони не припиняють всіх цих намагань. Я вдячний кожному і кожній, хто тримає оборону і наближає і для Донбасу, і для Приазов'я, і для Херсону те саме, що зараз відбувається на Харківщині. Крок за кроком змушуємо окупантів піти з нашої землі, змусимо піти з українського моря. До речі, зараз у багатьох містах і громадах України тривають дискусії про перейменування вулиць і площ. Раджу звернутися до історій українських праведників і увічнити їхню пам'ять. Бо це саме про ту сміливість і людяність українців, які вже довели, що зло, яке приходить на нашу землю, неминуче програє. Вічна слава усім нашим захисникам і захисницям. Вічна пам'ять усім, хто віддав життя за Україну. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy. Once again, an incredible statesman and an incredible figure in the minds and hearts of the Ukrainians and people around the world, as he has shown the mark of what a brave leader truly looks like. And with that, that concludes today's segment of the news. I thank you all so much for watching. If you are new to this channel and you have enjoyed this news, make sure to subscribe, because every single day of the week, except for Mondays, we run a stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine and show footage and give commentary like this every single day, showing what's unfolding. And usually, we're actually a little bit faster than the news by about a few days or maybe even a week sometimes. An example, our analysis has been spot on so far, because finally the mainstream news is saying what I've been saying for about a week in the Kharkiv area. So with that, I thank you all once again, and we're now going to move on to the question segment. And with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have quite a few super chats here and live chats, some really good questions. So first up, we have a $25 donation from Joe, who says, hit the like now. Let's break the most likes in shortest time frame record. Not sure what that is, but it sounds like a fun idea given the current viewership. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I do agree, if all of y'all can hit the like button, that is a huge way to support this channel without actually having to send in a super chat or buy merch or anything like that. It's a very simple thing to do. All you do is click on that thumbs up button right there on the video, and it helps us out a massive deal. It helps us to reach more people, and it helps more people to get this news. It helps the Leaf Spring Army to grow, and when the Leaf Spring Army grows, there's more help that we can send out on the Sunday fundraisers just because we're able to field more of it. So, if you would like to help us out in achieving wonderful things and also delivering this accurate news to more people, make sure to slam that like button as fast as you can. I can already see the number climbing a pretty good bit, but let's see if we can get up to 3,000 here within the next few minutes. So with that, thank you so much for the support, and also doing a huge rally there for the like button. That's incredibly neat. We haven't had a lot of people saying that. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Sweaty Leathers, who says, have you considered as a fundraiser United 24? The revenue goes directly to Ukraine and is the fund that President Zelenskyy has endorsed directly.
Let me take a look at that. United 24. Let's pull that up. United 24. United 24 for Boston to London. Nice. I like that. Let's see. United 24 organization. I'll have to take a look at that and see if that's on the GuideStar program. I'm not finding a lot of information about it on the internet. I mean, I could pull up a flight from Boston to London before it pulled up the nonprofit, and it's still not pulling up the nonprofit. But I will take a look at it and see if we can find any additional information about it. And if it is possible, we will probably try and run a fundraiser for that here in the near future. So, I thank you so much for the support and giving us a recommendation. I didn't know that he actually endorsed that fundraiser in particular. And if we're ever able to get him here on stream on a Sunday, I'm going to make sure, if it's possible, to have that one as the fundraiser. So I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment/question in a way. And with that, I'm going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we are paid a visit from the Salmon Nation. S. Moore puts in a $15 donation and says, from the Salmon Nation, Marvelous Meredith reports that the Atlantic Salmon Caucus are encouraged to hear the Finland and Sweden are looking to join Sweden are looking to join NATO. Their natal streams will be defended.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it is, of course, always wonderful to hear from the Sockeye Nation. And to answer your question, yes, Sweden and Finland have been eyeballing NATO membership ever since the beginning of this war and the escalation of tensions in Europe. Of course, that's something that is being fast-tracked right now by both parties, both NATO and the Swedes and the Finns. But one thing we've seen as a roadblock is Turkey, and it appears that they are going to be objecting to the vote to allow them in solely on some sort of concessions. I'm not exactly sure what kind of I'm going to use another term just so I don't mispronounce it because it just slipped out of my mind. They're looking for favors. We're not really sure what kind of favors they're looking for, but I think that they're actually trying to leverage the political situation right now to get something for them out of this entire thing. I don't really think they're actually objecting to Finland and Sweden joining NATO just because. I think there's actually a reason behind it, and they're trying to leverage something to get something out of this. Still a pretty scummy move to do, if you're really looking at that on the level, but still, it is something interesting to note. So I thank you very much for the support, and yes, that is true. Sweden and Finland are looking to join NATO right now. And so, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have two $20 donations. We have one from Three Goodness, and we have one from Osio Dohitsu. Thank you very much to both of you. Very generous support. And Enforcer, take it away.
And I thank you so much for your support. It helps out this channel a whole load. And it's kind of weird to me that tonight we've had a load of super chats that don't even have questions attached to them. But I'm still grateful for the support nonetheless. And it's very interesting to me that so many people find the streams alone worth of value to send in super chats. They don't even have questions, and I find that, honestly, when I really think about it like that, I'm very honored that y'all would send in super chats without questions attached, because y'all find the streams so worth it that you would just send in the super chats just to support the channel. So I thank you both so much for the support. It helps us out a load, and it helps us keep on doing this. By the way, everyone, we do have a generally good idea that the video will be out soon. We're eyeballing within a week or two. So keep your eyes peeled. That will be my face reveal, and it'll probably happen within the next week or two. So just letting everyone know in advance. And so, with that, I thank y'all both so much for your support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $25 donation from, I'm not sure if this is the Geoff that we're familiar with, but we have a Geoff Newport that says, supporting the Penguins. FYI, the Australian Bushmaster is only 180 miles from the Phillip Island Penguin Colony, LOL.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I didn't actually know that the Bushmasters were that close to a penguin colony. What am I talking about? A penguin colony. That's actually something interesting to me. I'll have to try and look into that if I can, but of course, I'm always hard-pressed for time. I don't have a lot of it. I spend a decent amount of time working on this stuff through the day, and the summaries have only added to that amount of time. But I'm still happy to put them out. Gets a lot of people information, and once again, people who are on the fly who can't exactly watch these streams every night get a good idea of some of the clips and information that's come out throughout the day. So I thank you so much for the support, and that is an interesting little bit of little tidbit of information to share. And so I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And coming up, we have 4, and that's right, 4 super chats from Sniper1, who puts in a $15 donation each time. So the first one from Sniper says, I'll personally scare the Russians with Viking/Nordic Viking music to chase them off.
Well, that's a very interesting idea. I think that they might get scared off if you have a washing machine without a dryer, or if you only have a drying machine. But I still think that is an interesting way into looking at scaring off the Russians, and I would highly suggest that you do try it. The Russians are a very fidgety bunch, and you can also just whistle at them and they'll run away too. So make sure that your songs do have little whistling noises in them, because that will make them run. So I thank you so much for the support. It is an interesting little joke right there. I like it. It's pretty good. And so with that, we're going to move on to your next super chat, Sniper.
And just real quick, for everybody asking, yes, Sweden. Sweden is going to be the new thing on this channel that everybody remembers us for.
You know what, Matthew? You know what? That's actually pretty good. I'm actually going to take that and run with it real quick, everyone, because that is a very easy way to not just say Sweden and Finland. We can combine them both, since they're both trying to enter NATO at the same time, and say Swedland. So actually, that's kind of a smart screw-up, because we can actually use that to shorten down what we're talking about with Sweden and Finland. We're just going to call it Swedland. So I thank y'all all very much for beating Matthew over the head about saying that, because that's actually giving me a pretty good idea that I'm probably just going to run with. So thank you so much, everyone, once again for doing that. Of course, I love the chat. It's really funny at times. It's also informative at times as well. It's really well-rounded, but of course, not to harp on the negative a little bit, but there's always the tiny group of people down there, and it's the smallest group, and they say the darndest things. But anyways, I thank you all so much. Y'all are great, and hopefully y'all will come tomorrow for the Sunday night fundraiser and pour your hearts out into it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up from Sniper1, another $15 donation, as I said earlier. He says, if Russia attacks Norway, they do not only need to fight NATO, they have to fight the North, who are very in the cause of Odin/Valhalla.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it is interesting to hear that you're really into the Norse stuff. You're really into the Norse culture up there, and that's really cool to hear, actually. One thing that's interesting to me is that the Nords are known for their Viking culture. The Swedes, as far as I know, are largely known for the Karelians. That was the infantry that was kind of the Swedes, I guess you could say, elite units during the times of Gustavus Adolphus. If y'all don't know who that is, really cool general as well, who fought in the 30 Years' War and then died. But he was a pretty good guy in the meantime, and he also did a lot to advance battle tactics of that era. And then, of course, every other country's got something going for it. But to skip to America, one thing I always find interesting is that there's so much, considering that I'm an American and I know all about American history, that you could emphasize here about the United States. In specifically, there's a million different things that you could talk about, but everyone in the world has decided, from what I can tell, that America is the land of the cowboy. Like in Japan, they have cowboy culture. In Britain, a lot of people want to be cowboys. We even saw that a park that was bombarded in Kharkiv had this little American cowboy section in it. And I think that is the absolute coolest thing that America could be hyped up for around the world, is cowboys. Like, there's a million other things, and I would have been happy with anything, but it's cool to know that the American stereotype around the world is the cowboy stereotype, or, you know, if you hate America, it's always like the fat, obese guy on like the motor scooter kind of stereotype. But, you know, either way, I'll live with either of them. I find both of them funny and entertaining in a way, and so I thank you so much for the support once again, Cyper Sniper, and also talking about Norse culture a pretty good bit. And it's also wonderful to hear that a lot of people are huge fans and toot their own horns about their own cultures. I really like that, and it's always interesting to hear what the Nords find very special about themselves. It's really neat. So I thank you very much for the support, and with that, we're going to move on to your next super chat.
And before we move on to Zyper's next question, I want to recognize a $50 super chat from Michael Hudkins. And thank you very much, Michael. Very, very generous of you. And now the Enforcer will take it from here.
And I have to thank you so much for the support. I just saw myself that you didn't send in the question with it, which is insane, but I thank you so much for the support. It helps us to run this channel all the way through. You know, of course, it's wonderful to get this amount of support from everyone, because it takes the burden off of my head of what will I do. Because at the beginning of this thing, I was actually really scared, because there was kind of like there was this clock ticking down in the background that none of y'all knew about. But if I didn't start making money doing something and at least support myself, I was going to have to go out and get a job somewhere, because I was running out of money. And so it's wonderful to know that we get this kind of support, because it helps me to keep on doing this. You know, this has become my job. I make, I survive off of it. And, I also am able to plan on doing other things with it. And it also does a service to y'all, and it gives y'all the news that y'all appreciate. So I thank y'all so much. And also, I love this job. This is what I pretty much dreamed of doing my entire life, was talking about something I'm really into, which is economics, the military, diplomacy, not really politics. Don't like politics, but I thank you all so much for the support and helping me to keep on running this channel. So I thank you so much once again, Michael Hudkins. It's a huge help. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, Zyper's next question is, or statement more like, we support you because you and Matt give the best info and make the best videos. Keep it up, and I'll watch till the end of time.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and it is wonderful to hear that you'll watch it until the end of the time. We're once again, for everyone who's wondering, once this war ends, there's kind of been a question of what will this channel do, because we've been doing nothing but Ukraine war stuff. And the plan is to already start branching out, if possible, and it's going to be a very, very small amount. It's not going to distract from my primary work, which is talking and analyzing the Ukraine war. We're actually going to start arching out into other stuff, and we're maybe going to start touching on political stuff, but I want to make it clear to everyone that I'm not into this mob stuff where both parties go at each other and slit each other's throats, and there's fights in the comment section and stuff like that. I'm not going to be picking sides. I'm going to present both sides, how both sides imagine and view themselves, and then just say, here's the information, this is what we've got, and this is the dynamics that's leading to what's happening in the world right now. I think that as a news reporting channel, which is pretty much what we've become, I think it's very distasteful of journalism to try and sway people to political sides or pick a side or something like that. Of course, there are times, though, that it will look like that. Like, for example, if you see something blatantly wrong, and I'm not talking about politically, I'm talking about like outside of the political sphere, and you say, hey, that's looking terrible, then of course it could be kind of construed that I'm trying to pick a political side, but that's not going to be the case. I promise y'all, this channel is going to stay absolutely down the middle. It's just going to talk about, when we do get into politics, what both sides are about, and just say, here y'all go, here's the information. I'm never going to pick a side. So with that, I thank you all so much for the support. I hope that you do enjoy it, and I hope that you watch that as well and find it very interesting. And I hope you find it refreshing from the usual kind of like mob mentality and opinion-driven news that we see a lot these days in the United States from every news organization. So thank you once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And real quick, I'm not sure who asked. I didn't see the chat, but for whoever asked, we are actually from Alabama. So that is the answer to that question. We are from the sweet home. No banjo though, but we are from Alabama. So next up here, Zyper's last question is, if World War, let's see here, just a moment, let me read it and see what he meant to say. If a world war breaks out, I'll give my life to save wounded soldiers If I see the US, France, UK, Nordic, etc. wounded, I'll leave the trench and save them, whether or not I have to give my own life.
Well, that's very heroic of you to say, and it's once again incredible to hear that you're a huge patriot for your country and that you will do your best to defend it. Wonderful to hear, and I do thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next super chat. I think we have one more from Cyper Sniper, don't we?
I think we do, but I think it's further on down the list. But before we get to that one, I want to recognize a very generous $75 donation from Michael Goebel, and I hope I'm saying that last name properly. Thank you very much, Michael. He didn't leave a comment, so once again, I'm relegated to saying that is very generous of you, and thank you very much. I wish, I'm kind of with the enforcer on that one. I wish y'all had comments because I feel like a broken record thanking y'all for your donations.
And I do too, and I'm always trying to come up in my head with more creative ways to genuinely say, and I know that all of y'all say I'm very genuine, but I still feel like it's always insincere to not have something new to say. But I've been thinking over and over of how to thank y'all so much for the donations where it doesn't sound like I'm a broken record, but you're just gonna have to take my word for it that I'm hugely appreciative of all the support everyone gives. It helps out this channel to keep on running, and I just thank you so much for it. I wish that there was a comment. It does give us something to talk about in terms of the super chat. So that way we can, of course, show you how appreciative we are for your support and also give you an answer and, maybe give a little bit extra, considering that you do support the channel. And that's, once again, something wonderful I like about the channel is that we've never run an ad at all. And if you ever go back to any videos and there is an ad being run on it, that's because it has a copyright claim on it and I've lost the monetization rights to the video. So just know that isn't me. That's actually YouTube overlords that came down, busted my kneecaps out, and started running ads on my videos because it has copyrighted stuff in it. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Let me make sure I get this right. Michael Goebel. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from a longtime channel regular, BSG Wolf, who says, nitric acid coke break, play ABBA to scare Russians, and best estimate of when the war will end.
Could you say that one more time? I don't really think I followed it all too well.
So the first part was a joke about nitric acid coke, and he also wants to play ABBA to scare the Russians, and then he has the question of what is the best estimate of when the war will end.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. Love the nitric acid coke joke. That one's kind of one that faded off a little bit, but people still bring it up. I like that one. It's pretty good. To move on to the last part of that question, the war ending is something very hard to state. Because if you looked at the Donbass situation back in 2014, one would assume that at least the rebellious Donbass region would have been quelled nearly immediately. But it wasn't, and that conflict has dragged on for years. So I'm not really sure if this will end within a few months. It probably will, honestly, because the Russians just don't have the capability to keep this thing running. And on top of that, it just doesn't seem like it should last all too long. This is kind of a war that I just can't imagine lasting long at all, because when you think about it, the Russians have been sanctioned into oblivion. They hardly have an industrial capacity anymore. They're starting to run shortages on basic goods like sugar. They're in a quagmire right now. They can't keep this up. They're going to have to stop this war and start begging for the sanctions to be lifted just for their country to survive pretty much in the modern world. So I believe that this war will most likely end by the end of this year, but I don't want to put an exact date, like a month or a time or anything like that. I just feel like it will be near the end of the year by the time this war ends, or maybe even sooner. But I can't tell right now because the situation could, of course, change within the next few weeks, and this war could drag on for a far longer time than anyone anticipates. So I'm sorry for the vague answer, but I don't really feel comfortable giving an answer because I think it's a little too difficult to give one that far into the future. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope I did answer that question to the best of my abilities. So with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another question from Zyper Sniper 1, who puts in another $15 donation. And Zyper Sniper, thank you very much for your continued support. He says, yes, we have a so-called weak army in Norway, but see our Nordic, and we will never surrender.
That's true. Historically, the Nords have never really surrendered without a fight. And I would like, of course, if a war did break out, I would like to see the Nords, along with everyone else, put up an incredibly good fight instead of just giving up. There was very few countries that have given up in history, and one of those few countries was Denmark in World War II, just remembering the one that's on the top of my head. They still put up a little bit of a fight, but it was incredibly short. I believe the war with Denmark lasted about a day, and then the Danish government surrendered outright. So hopefully Norway wouldn't go that direction. I don't think they would, because they, of course, would have support from the United States, most likely, and other larger countries militarily in the NATO alliance, for example, France and Britain, that would most likely be up there with some forces as well. So I feel like the Nords wouldn't fall immediately, and of course y'all have a great fighting spirit, and it'll of course be a unifying moment for your country, and so it wouldn't give up so easily, considering that it would be a defensive war most likely. So I thank you very much for the support once again, Cyber Sniper, and it is wonderful to hear that you're a huge patriot of your country. It's wonderful to hear that a lot of people are always proud of their country and what they bring to the table. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $13 donation from RDY4THDLL, who says, will crazy Putin strike a UN country because of the military lethal weapon aid from UN countries?
No, I don't think he will. Putin is stupid. We can see that in the terms of how this war is being carried out. But Putin is not stupid enough to commit suicide. That would be suicide for Russia and the rest of the developed world. So I don't think that they will be going down that route, because that would be the end of Russia. If they attacked a NATO country, there's no way they could recover beyond that point, and it will lead to a nuclear onslaught. It would lead to their destruction, because while a lot of people fear that if the West goes to war with Russia, we'll be nuked, one has to remember that that's not a one-way street. The Russians will be nuked into oblivion as well. And so in the event of attacking a NATO country, he has pretty much signed the end of history for Russia, in a way. So I thank you so much for the support. That's kind of how I'm looking at it right now. One always has to remember that if Russia attacks NATO, there is always the end of nuclear. Well, there always is the end to this war, which will be the nuclear destruction of Russia as well. So with that, I hope I did answer that question, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $12 donation from Rob Scott, who says, thank you for the format change. This is the best episode so far, and not 2 hours of just making fun of the Russians.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. I haven't really been... I made fun of the Russians a pretty good bit so far tonight, but I mean, like, you know, I make fun of the Russians a pretty good bit because they're a competent fighting force. And at the beginning of the war, I didn't, because we didn't really know how the Russians were going to perform, and they were kind of a little bit formidable at the start, even though I didn't really believe that all too much. It was still in the back of my head, and so I didn't want to make fun of them too much, just in case I had to eat my own words. But now we watch the Russians pulling Laurel and Hardy, Three Stooges routines across the entire front line, and you can't help but laugh at them at this point, because they're so incompetent. It's almost cartoony levels of villainy incompetence. So I thank you very much for the support. I am glad that you're enjoying tonight's episode, and of course the way it's being run. But now that you said that, I'm gonna have to throw in some more Russian jokes, but I'm just kidding with you. I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're gonna move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Alex Papadopoulos, who says, enjoying very much your daily analysis. You're making a tangible contribution to the collective fight.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. And while the analysis is of course wonderful, and we keep on building a massive community around this channel, I feel like the most important contribution this channel makes is the Sunday fundraisers. $250,000 has been raised, nearly. I mean, like, it's a little off, but nearly $250,000, just a few thousand short. That has been raised in support of Ukraine and nonprofits operating there. And I feel that is the best thing that this channel does by far. I think, and that's a huge thing to me. That's something that even if this channel dies in the future, once this war is over, I'll be able to go around for the rest of my life and say that I'm rallied support for Ukraine like that. And I was a part of this struggle for their freedom in a way. It's a very detached way, and of course, nonprofits aren't, of course, helping out the direct situation unfolding on the ground, but it is still helping out in a way, and I'll be able to say that, and all of y'all will be able to say that as well. It's not just a me thing. A lot of y'all, like Narya, for example, has put in probably tens of thousands of dollars at this point in support of Ukraine on this channel alone, and so everyone will be able to go around for the rest of their lives saying, I helped out in some way. And I feel like that's the most important thing we've done on this channel, is trying to help out any way we have been able to. So I thank you so much for the support. It's wonderful to hear that you do enjoy what we do here. And it is, of course, great to hear that you do find these analysis very good. And, you know, there's people who come through here and they say the analysis isn't good. But at this point, I don't even listen to that because I've had, you know, I've had people who I never believed would ask me what's going on in Ukraine, asking me what's going on over there. I'm not going to go into names, but I never thought that my analysis was that good, that people who I put on a pedestal would come to me and ask me what I was thinking and what was going on over there and all that. So I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you do enjoy it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Eric Heiss, who says, who is homelier, Enforcer or Enforcer Matt? And I think he's straight up asking us if we're ugly.
Oh, well, to answer that question, I will take the bullet. I'll say it's me. You know, we're not exactly ugly. We're not exactly hot either. But we're kind of down the middle. You'll see it in the face reveal. You'll see what I look like. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. But I'll take the bullet and say that Matthew's probably the better looking one out of the two of us. So with that, thank you so much for the support, and we're gonna move on to the next question.
And Eric, I will say, fortunately, we are not hideous creatures. So with that being said, we're moving on. We have a $10 donation from Paul Heil next, who says, any validity to the news on the reported coup in progress that Ukrainian Major General Kyrylo Budanov stated?
We haven't got any news on that progress, and that's something that hasn't even popped up on my radar. If a coup was in progress, I believe that we would be hearing a lot more about it. I think that would be something that would be televised on the major news networks, because that's something that would get everyone on TV. And I've only seen the news of that being sent through some of the I guess you could say lower rung news companies like the Daily Mail and stuff like that. And while I believe that it is a high possibility and it can be happening right now, I want to wait for more confirmed information about it rather than like a third party report from the Ukrainians saying it's underway. Like, for example, how do they know it's on? Well, you know, I don't want to discredit the Ukrainians, of course. That's something that I'm not trying to do here. But how does the Ukrainian intelligence bureau know that a coup is underway, and how come we haven't heard anything official about that from the Russians? I feel like we would have heard something, like some sort of new group trying to pop up in the Russian government saying, we are in control now, Putin's been deposed, we're going to be running the thing. And we haven't really heard that either. And supposedly this has been going on for nearly a day or at least 12 hours. So I thank you very much for the support. We're going to keep an eye on that situation. I'm not sure if it is happening or not anymore. We're going to keep an eye on it, though, and we'll try and get some more information about it. So take what I'm saying right now with a grain of salt, because I don't know if it is or isn't happening. This is Schrodinger's coup, in a way, as far as I'm concerned. So I thank you once again. I hope that does answer the question, at least as far as I'm concerned. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Matt, who says, running can't beat Finland if they're having trouble with Ukraine.
No, they can't. They can't beat any country if they're having problems with Ukraine. And I'm not saying that Ukraine is the bottom rung of military capabilities, but still, at the same time, the Ukrainians are not one of the most powerful militaries on Earth. You know, if you just pull up a random statistic, what rank is Ukraine's military? You'll see 22 of 142. That's not good. If you pull up Russia's, what rank, you know, and this is, of course, probably based off of pre-war, is Russian military. It's probably up near number 3 or number 2. Russia is ranked 2 out of 142. That means that according to Global Firepower, which I don't know if you can trust them or not, Russia is the second most powerful military on Earth, which I'm laughing at right now because they obviously don't have the budget to really back that up. But still, according to online internet rankings, however much you can trust them, Ukraine is 10 times weaker than the Russians, yet the Russians are getting beat by the Ukrainians. That gives you a really good idea of how poor off the Russians are. And so I can agree with you that if the Russians cannot beat Ukraine, they can't beat anyone. Even countries like Finland that do have a smaller military than Ukraine, because look at them, they're a joke. I mean, like, the Russians are a joke. They just can't do any of this stuff that they're trying to act like they can. So I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, Zyper Sniper 1, I think, is trying to set a record here for the most chats sent in by a single viewer on any one stream. He sends in another $15 donation and says, if Russia is so weak, what would happen if the Russians have to fight the Vikings and NATO? Oh, yes, they would be slaughtered. Never mind.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Cyber Sniper, and I would answer that question, but you pretty much answered it for me, and I have to agree with you that that is the assessment that I would make as well. So I thank you very much for the support, and also kind of like the little bit of a question and a joke there. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Cody Baker, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I was a 777 gunner for 7 years. Glad to see our Ukrainian redlegs making St. Barbara sing. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine, and I have to agree, it's wonderful to see that all of these M777s that have arrived in Ukraine from all the countries around the world are being used to an effective degree and are also causing a large amount of damage to Russian forces. So, I do thank you so much, and also that's very interesting to hear that you were an M777 gunner back in the day, and so, once again, I thank you very much for the support, and also providing your commentary on the M777 as well, considering that you are experienced with the piece, and it's wonderful to hear that you have high praise of it as well. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Rockets Red Wines, who says, sounds like that Russian officer was fragged by his troops. Keep up the great work. We've been watching since day 24, and shout out to my wife. Miss you, Chico. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's wonderful to hear that you have been watching for an incredibly long amount of time. Could you reread that question for me real quick, Matthew? Because for some reason it just escaped my head.
So he's referring to that Russian officer that supposedly left the safety off the gun and, ended his life, basically. He's saying it sounded like he was fragged by his troops and it wasn't just a accidental suicide.
Well, he may have been fragged by his troops, yeah, but, I wouldn't doubt it either that the Russian officer in question was so incompetent that he didn't even put the safety on his gun and he did blow his brains out. I wouldn't doubt that either, because the Russians have shown that they have really no idea how any sort of weaponry really works. So I thank you very much for the support and your commentary on the matter, but I do think that I would be still leaning towards that officer was probably just so dumb he pretty much killed himself out of his own stupidity. So thank you once again for the support. I hope I did address the comment pretty well, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Ryan 9000. He says, did you and Matt get into any fights growing up? If so, a story would be funny for us to hear. And Ryan, I cannot confirm nor deny.
I'm going to have to also confirm nor deny right there too. That's information that is of course kept secret by the Politburo. So I thank you very much for the support. Unfortunately, we would have to travel far into the archives to get that information for you. The answer is yes, but I'm not going to go into any of the particular stories because, like siblings fight, brothers specifically certainly fight, but I don't want to go into it. So I thank you very much for the support. Sadly, I won't be able to answer that one. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next here, we have a $10 donation from Praise Adonai, who says, Enforcer, Bob the Viking here. Many countries will help free Norway. We will help them.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad to hear that other people from around the world also support Norway and would help in their defense if the Russians did anything to them. The question really isn't will people support Norway. The question is how many forces would be sent to Norway, because if Norway is attacked, the entirety of NATO goes to war, so they will be defended for sure. And I'm glad to hear that a lot of people would stand up for the defense of Norway and the Vikings that pretty much inhabit that land still. While they're not really Vikings nowadays, they still have the Viking legacy and heritage. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way, and it's wonderful to hear that people do back up their NATO partners. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Hegemony Cricket, who says, during the Cold War, I was a spook for U.S. military intelligence. Part of my job was intercepting Soviet military comms. They didn't use encryption then either. I can't believe they're still so bad.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and that's very interesting to hear that you're actually an intelligence officer during the Cold War. So thank you very much for your service, and also thank you very much to the M777 gunner we had here in the super chat as well. To address that comment, I think you and me both know at this point that the Russians and, the former Soviets are an incompetent military force for the large part, both in their design theories, their production processes, and also their fielding and actual use of military units. You can see from start to finish, very incompetent all the way around. So I'm actually not too surprised that they haven't changed their their encoding process or deciphering process or anything really to do with the sensitivity of their information. They have not changed. I'm not surprised. One thing that we do know is that a kid was able to fly his Cessna to Moscow and landed in the middle of the Red Square because the Russians are such an incompetent group of people. So I think, well, not really the Soviets and the military, pretty much. I'm not trying to say the entire group of people in Russia are absolutely incompetent and dumb or anything. I'm just saying that the people who wind up in politics and the military over there certainly are. So I thank you very much for the support, and I do thank you for weighing in and also giving us a little bit of historical context as to how incompetent the Russian/Soviet armed forces have been throughout all of history. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And I can say with certainty at this point, Zyper Sniper is officially the record holder for the most chats from any single stream. He puts in another $15 donation and says, bring the Ukrainian Ghost Division, just like Germany did in World War II with Erwin Rommel, did with France in 1940.
I would have to agree. That is, of course, an interesting idea, and I would like to see that being implemented here in the modern world if it would be effective. So I'm trying to think, just like Germany did. I'm not bring the Ukrainian, just like. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Ukrainian forces being in Norway would be an interesting sight to see for sure. I had to sit there and read that for a second to understand the context there. For some reason, it wasn't clicking in my head. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I do think that would be pretty neat to see Ukrainian Ghost Division being used in Norway's defense if war was to break out. So I thank you very much for the support once again, Zyper Sniper. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Man of Culture, who says, great stream like always. Here's a couple of suggestions for your next guest. Perun or Anamarchy. Both are Aussies, so scheduling might be hard, but both do great analysis on the technical side of the war.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I will try and look into them. But one thing that is a little tough, though, with the guests is that I'm trying to see if either they have well, really, what's their names, actually? Tell me their names again so that way I can pull them up on YouTube, so that way I'm not walking into this half-cocked. So, what's their name?
So he said Perun, which is spelled P-E-R-U-N, and there's also one more, Anamarchy.
Okay, so, Anamarchy. How's that spelled?
A-N-I-M-A-R-C-H-Y.
Could you spell that for me, but a little bit slower? A-N-I...
M-A-R-C-H-Y.
Interesting. I might look into having them on. That would be something interesting to do. Hopefully, of course, it'd be on a Sunday night fundraiser, and hopefully there would be a large support from their communities for our fundraisers as well, so that way we could try and get as much support as possible. That's kind of my whole entire goal with bringing on guests on Sunday night fundraisers, is to try and get that much extra support for our Sunday fundraisers and get that much more help out. So I would have to see if that would be possible, and I may look into it. So I thank you very much for the support. Of course, scheduling would be a little bit of an issue there. And so thank you once again. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Vasily, who says, my great-grandpa was a Ukrainian Jew who fought Nazis for the USSR. Well, at least one of my great-grandpas. He did the radio stuff and whatnot, and glory to the heroes.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and that is very interesting here that you have a little bit of family history about your family fighting for the USSR against the Germans and Nazism back in the day. So that's wonderful to hear, and I do thank you very much for the support and sharing that interesting little tidbit with you. I'm sure you're very proud of your grandfather, like I am of my, I guess you could say elders of my family who also served in World War II here in the United States. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a pretty good way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just real quick, folks, just a quick note. I'm noticing a lot of political talk in the chat, If we could, please avoid talking about politics in the chat, just so that way we don't annoy any of our other viewers that want to stick to Ukraine. That would be greatly appreciated.
Hang on, Matthew. My headset just died, so give me just a second.
Uh-oh.
Stand by, everyone. My headset just keeled off on me, so I got to recharge it here and turn it back on. Okay, so let me see here if I can get the volume up on this thing. All right, testing. Can you hear me, Matthew?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, and so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
So we have 2 donations here. We have 2 $10 donations, one from Robert Middlesworth and one from Vance Hicks again. So thank you very much for your donations, and thank you for supporting the channel. So up next, we have a $10 donation from Hoodoo, Texas, who says, those sleek technicals are called rail buggies. You can look them up. Rail-type frames, powerful off-road vehicles, super dune buggies. Also, did you see the Loose Spring 1918 quad?
I don't think I saw the Lee Spring 1918 quad. I looked around for it, but I couldn't find it myself. So I will try and look for it again, although I didn't see it myself once again. But also, I do thank you very much for sharing the information about what kind of quads those are that the Ukrainians appear to be using more and more en masse. And it does look like that's the direction that technical warfare is leading towards in the modern day. Instead of using pickup trucks, it now looks like they're using ATVs and buggies. So I thank you very much for the support. And also to weigh in, although my headset had died and I was just trying to get back into the grooves of things, I don't want anyone to talk about politics here in the chat, specifically American politics. That gets very bloody, and people are very militant about their opinions in modern day politics, and I don't really want that stuff brought in here. Not just because it's a very violent topic and people, you know, are very hardcore in what they believe, but on top of that, we're talking about the Ukraine war. What's happening in U.S. politics is a sideshow compared to what's actually going on inside of Ukraine itself. I know a lot of people hear about, say, war is politics. War is not politics. War is diplomacy. Politics is another thing that deals with domestic concerns inside of a country. If you were talking about Ukrainian politics, as in the majority party and the opposition party, that would be another thing. But most of everyone who talks about politics is always talking about American politics, which really has nothing to do with the actual situation on the ground in Ukraine. Like, you know, just to say, if some guy in the United States Congress says that he doesn't want to support funding to Ukraine, that's not killing soldiers on the ground as of right now. That's something of a background issue that's really not concerning the actual conflict on the ground. So I don't really want anyone to bring up politics, specifically American politics, if I had to pick one, because it just leads to bloody fights in the comments and it completely detracts from what we're all here about, which is the support of Ukraine. So I thank you all very much for hopefully understanding what I'm saying and not really talking about politics too much, because really honestly, if it gets too out of hand, we're going to have to go through and clear out people, because I'm not going to have this devolve into like a political fight in a way. But I do thank you all so much for being heavily engaged and trying to, you know, kind of argue what y'all believe in. But at the same time, this is about Ukraine, not really about American politics. So thank you all once again. And with that, we're going to move back on to the questions.
And we have another one from Zyper Sniper 1 again, another $15 donation. He says, here is a little coffee fund from Norway to stay awake from all this info that you and Matt keeps giving us, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and it is wonderful to hear that we do get a lot of support for our coffee fund around the world, including from Norway. We've been getting a lot of super chats tonight, specifically from Zyper Sniper from Norway, and it is wonderful to hear that we continue to get support, including a little bit of extra coffee money, which will certainly keep us awake and will help us to keep running. So thank you once again for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And now we have another $10 donation from Sweaty Leathers again, who says, it's United 24 with no spaces. I love your channel, by the way.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I will try and look into that again and try and spell it correctly. Oh, bless me, goodness. But I thank you so much for the support and also sharing that info with us. And so, with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says Ukrainians are definitely not fighting a fair war. We all know that baiting is not allowed in war. Ukrainians drop all the washing machines around the field. Easy pickings.
Well, thank you very much for the joke. And yeah, that's pretty true. That's something that we've seen a lot, is that the Russians love washing machines. Not really sure why, talking seriously about it. They never get the dryers or anything like that. They just get the washing machines alone. Some people have been hypothesizing that that may actually be because the Russians are trying to use the circuitry within the washing machines to produce weaponry, but I don't believe that's the case because we never actually see them being taken off the front. They're just being lugged around with Russian infantry units and such things like that. So I thank you very much for the support and also the joke. That's a pretty funny one to hear. And yeah, the Ukrainians are not fighting a fair fight because the Russians are just going for the washing machines directly. Also, one other thing is that I've seen some people trying to tie like a political affiliation with me, and I've heard some, and to be honest, of course, I've heard people saying I'm left wing and right wing. I wouldn't recommend doing that because I'm not trying to get associated with any political party, and so I honestly don't like that people try and play the guessing game with what I'm actually aligned to, because I'm not, I'm trying to stay as neutral as possible, yet some people keep on trying to pull me out and make me pick a side, which is something that is terrible to do in terms of the actual quality of news, and it also, I just don't like that in general. So with that, if everyone could please desist for the large part on trying to assign me to some political faction. I'm never going to say which side I'm on. So I thank you very, very much for trying to, but it's not going to succeed. So I thank you all once again. And with that, we're going to move on back to the questions.
And next up, we have a $100 donation from Al M, who says, yes, pineapple sounds like bananas in Russian. It was hilarious to see the word pineapple fly across the chat endlessly when you asked Google, LOL. Do you think that Russian tactics, destruction, and cruelty was planned from the start, or was it a reaction to failure? Thank you.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and yes, it was hilarious to watch pineapples go at 5,000 miles an hour. I think it was hilarious to me, and I love whenever that stuff happens because everyone's like, it's pineapple, 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 and you're just washing it at 1,000 miles an hour. So I have to agree with that. And also, to answer the next part of that question, could you reread the last part that's not the pineapple part for me, Matthew?
Yeah, he says, do you think that Russian tactics, destruction, and cruelty was planned from the start or a reaction to failure?
It was definitely a reaction to failure. At the beginning, we saw the Russians giving no mind whatsoever to Ukrainian civilians, doing whatever they were doing. They were allowing the civilians to go about their daily lives, and everyone was thinking, oh, wow, look, it's a modern civilized war. The civilians are going to be left alone almost entirely. And then the Russians slammed a missile straight into an apartment building in Kyiv, and then everyone was like, oh, this is not going to go well. And then after a while, we started to see that this Russian blitzkrieg that was planned started to fall apart. And as it began to fall apart, we started to see the Russians bombarding cities into oblivion, much like we saw during the Chechen wars and also during the Georgian wars, and also during the Russian military intervention in Syria as well. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question, because as far as we've been able to assess, that does look like it's really retaliatory against the failures that they faced during their special military operations so far. So I thank you once again. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
All right, and give me one moment here to reorganize this so I can make sure I recognize everybody properly. First up, we have a couple of donations here without comments. We have a $50 donation from John Boyer. Thank you very much, John. Very generous of you, and we appreciate your support of the channel. And real quick, before the enforcer jumps in, we also have a $20 donation from Sharon Tukolsky. Thank you very much, Sharon, as well, for your support as well.
And it's also, of course, always wonderful to hear that a lot of people support this channel. And not wanting to sound like a broken record, but I do thank you both so much for your support. Helps our channel to go a long way. And we are always appreciative of everyone who helps us to continue to deliver this news. And so, thank you once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from BC Skyman, who is a channel regular, who says, I found out some interesting information today. My neighbor does specialty electronics. He said that the semiconductors are breaking down in the tanks, and they're stealing them out of the appliances.
Interesting. That's actually something new, and I think that may be why they're lugging them around. Well, that doesn't really make any sense to me. Why wouldn't they just strip out the necessary parts out of the washing machines instead of carrying them around? That's a question I have right there. But maybe it's just because they're not actually thinking, or maybe you can't remove the specific parts you're talking about, the semiconductors and stuff, without damaging them beyond the point. Well, you have to be able to get them out to use them. I don't know. That's actually something interesting to think about right there. But I do thank you very much for providing that little bit of information with us and letting us know a little bit of another idea of what may be the reason for them lugging around all of these washing machines everywhere. So with that, I thank you so much for the support and providing that information to us. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a question from Zyper Sniper 1 again, who says, if Volodymyr Zelenskyy is basically on the front line, or at least at the cross eye, why aren't Putin the same? Give Putin a bullet through the head.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Zyper Sniper. But we do have to remember that while Zelenskyy didn't leave and he was incredibly close to the front line, I don't think we've actually seen Zelenskyy visit the front line. And you do have to remember that in a modern war, much like this one, a leader cannot really go to the front line without being killed nearly instantly. Considering that the Russians probably are having eyes on Zelenskyy and where he is all the time, it would be very difficult and very dangerous for him to actually make it to the front line himself and fight there because he could die. And so I completely understand why he is very careful, and we've seen him kind of stay in Kyiv from now on. We haven't seen him visiting or traveling anywhere around the country because it's incredibly dangerous for him, and I do hope that he stays as safe as possible. He's an incredibly important leader for Ukraine, and his death would be a massive blow to morale. It may even wipe out the morale entirely, considering that he's pretty much been the glue that's binded the nation together so far. However, we've seen that Putin has never even left the Kremlin as far as we know. Zelenskyy at least gets out and walks around and meets people, but Zelenskyy has only been seen, well, not Zelenskyy, Putin has only been seen inside of the buildings within the Kremlin, talking to other government and military officials and such things like that. So I do understand where you're coming from, but you do have to remember that having higher-ups and officials near the front lines in the way of danger is incredibly dangerous, especially here in the modern world. So I thank you very much for the support once again. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 donation from Yoli H. And thank you very much, Yoli, for your support. You've been around for quite some time. And thank you very much for your continued support of the channel.
And I do thank you so much as well. It's wonderful to hear that you, of course, continue to support our channel. It does mean a lot to us. Unfortunately, I'm having a really hard time hearing the questions because I'm trying to like hold the headset up to my head without having it on because the cord is not long enough. But I do thank you so much for the support, and it helps us out a whole load. And it's always wonderful to know that a lot of people appreciate what we do. And so with that, we're going to go on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Quai Gamer, who says, Norway sank the Blucher. I'm probably saying that incorrectly.
The Blucher.
How's it said? Blucher?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let me start over. Norway sank the Blucher. This was the equivalent of when Ukraine sank the Moskva. Norway and Finland were fighting the Nazis when they were allied with the Soviet Union. Talk about a fighting spirit.
Norway and Finland?
That is what he says.
Actually, I hate to say this, but you are mistaken. The Finns actually joined the Nazis in World War II. If you pull it up, they were friends with the Germans a pretty good bit. Well, I'll actually pull that up just real quick. And actually, I'm going to see if I can unplug my headset and I'll have enough battery to get through the rest of this thing. Hopefully it will. I have a feeling it'll probably die again, but that's okay. But was Finland in the Axis in World War II? Finland was classified as an ally of Nazi Germany. Sadly, they didn't really fight against Nazism, but you do have to remember that Finland was put in between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't side with the Soviets. The Soviets' intent and plan was to completely obliterate the Finns, so they had no friend there. And so the only other person they could turn to in Europe without being obliterated by the Germans was the Germans. And so they decided to align themselves with the Germans because that seemed to be the best route for them at the time. So it wasn't exactly like the Finns were just straight up hardcore Nazis. It's just that those were the only people they kind of could find a friend in. To answer the other question, though, well, the other part of that, Norway was definitely a part of the Allies and definitely fought against the Nazi Germans directly. And that's something that I think was really impressive, is that they actually tried, unlike the Danish, who tried a little and then gave up really quickly. The Norwegians at least sank the Blucher, which was much like the Moskva at the time, but it was even better than the Moskva because the Blucher was brand new. The Blucher had literally just been launched from dry dock just about a week before and then sailed to its fate right there near the Oscarborg fortress. And the whole reason it was sank is because the Norwegians were using Austro-Hungarian torpedoes that were in an underwater silo. Now, think about that, y'all. Austria-Hungary had no longer no, I'm good. Austria-Hungary had no longer existed at that time for around 30 years. And the torpedoes they actually bought in 1899. You may have just heard me say I'm good. That was Matthew coming in with a headset that I don't really need. I'm good. So I thank Matthew for that, and also scaring the hell out of me. I just almost jumped out of my skin right there. But still, it was wonderful to see that the Ukraine. Oh Lord, it was wonderful to see that the Norwegians. I'm all thrown off now, but it was wonderful to see the Norwegians actually hold up a stand. So with that, thank you very much for the support, and it is wonderful to hear that the Norwegians are proud in their history. It's wonderful to know that there are a huge group of people in Norway who are huge fans of their country and what they are and their culture and everything. So I thank you all very much for the support, and specifically you for your super chat. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And yes, people, I did just walk into Enforcer's room and he almost had a heart attack. I was just trying to deliver a headset. So sorry, Enforcer, didn't mean to almost cause you a heart attack there.
Nah, it's fine. It's fine. I'm only like at a high blood pressure right now and there's blood seeping out my eyeballs. But anyways, on to the next question.
Okay, so next up we have a $100 donation from TB, who says, I appreciate the incredible work that goes into this, and I watch every incredible day. But please sometimes listen to what we hear. Way too many words, needless repetition, incredible overuse of incredibly repetitive phrases. I watch next day on 1.5 times speed.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but sadly, I do talk how I talk. I don't really have a lot of preparation going into this just because of the amount of time it takes to put together the stream and then run it. I don't really have a lot of time to sit here and like try and think about what I'm saying. I have to say it all on the fly. And so while I would like to try and reap something from that and try and curb that kind of stuff, at the same time, you do have to remember I'm very pressed for time. And so I don't really have a load of time to just sit there and think about what I'm going to be saying. I'm kind of having to say it on the fly. So I do thank you very much for enjoying this channel and sending in a massive amount of support. It does help us out a lot. But sadly, that's something I really can't fix all too well, just because of what I've mentioned previously. But I do thank you so much for the support. It helps us out a load. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Eric Andreas, who says, Enforcer, have you thought about bringing Artur Rihai as a guest? He's an Estonian soldier with an interesting perspective on the war. His YouTube channel is entertaining, but my go-to is the Enforcer.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. We're actually going to pull him up real quick. I've heard of him and seen him before. Artur Rihai. I spelled it wrong. It was Arthur. I spelled it Arthur. Artur. He's got a tracksuit. This man's legit. Let's take a look at him. So we can see. You won't believe these nade drops. Interesting. I think I would have to take a good look at his videos. I think I've actually watched this one. It shows that I've watched it all the way through, which is interesting because I don't actually remember doing that. But I'll have to take a look at him, and I will see about maybe bringing him on. Although my main goal is to try and bring Ukrainians on, like either the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian government, or something similar, so that way we can get answers from the ground in there. Although Funker 530 is going to be a little bit of an exception because I said some stuff about him, and also they watched the stream, and then I cleared up what I said about him because it wasn't true. And then on top of that, I actually found out they were really cool people, and they also want me on their stream, and I think it'd be cool for them to come to my stream because the amount of support that could be brought by them coming here is huge, and I like that idea, and I like that their channel and my channel could team up on my stream to get a fundraiser going as large as it can go. So with that, I thank you so much for the support and the idea. I'll take a look into it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have another donation from Zyper Sniper 1 of $15. And they say Norway hold from 8th of April till June 10th. So around to Maus in World War II, we will we will never surrender in World War III if it happens.
Well, thank you very much for the support. It's wonderful to hear that everyone in Norway is coming out of the woodworks. I think every single person in Norway tonight's watching this stream, because y'all are making a sales pitch for how well this country is going to defend itself in World War III. And at this point, based off of what y'all are saying, I believe it will. So I thank y'all very much for the support and also cheerleading y'all's country. It's impressive to see that there's so many Norwegian patriots out there. And with that, I thank you so much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Juju Harvey, who says, off topic, football question. Are y'all Bama fans or Auburn fans? And Juju, we can't touch that one with a 10-foot pole.
You see, the thing is that while I said I don't talk about American politics, football, American football here kind of like extends into politics as well. Because if I say one or the other, there's going to be people here in this chat that will murder me. I'll be getting death threats. Trees will be poisoned. Football players will get piss thrown on their foreheads. I just don't want that. So I'm not going to comment on that, but I do thank you very much for the support. It does help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And thank you very much for your support, Juju. Up next, we have a $10 donation from Electrostatic1, who says, Zelenskyy did visit Bucha right after the withdrawal in full flak jacket and helmet.
Yes, I did see that, and that was one of the few times that he did leave the area of Kyiv. But you do have to remember that the Bucha-Hostomel airfield area is nearly a suburb of Kyiv. And while I'm not trying to mitigate what Zelensky's been doing, I mean, like, Zelenskyy is the most impressive statesman in modern history, in my opinion, and I think he'll remain that way for the rest of the century. It's very important to note, like, logic and reason when talking about this kind of thing, and I don't think it would be smart for him, and I wouldn't really agree with it if he went far away from Kyiv, because he would be in an incredibly dangerous environment where the situation couldn't be controlled as well as it is near Kyiv. So I do agree that that did happen, but still at the same time, it's not too far from Kyiv and not too far from the safety of the security perimeter they pretty much made to keep him safe and keep him alive. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, at least with my opinion. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, would you like to put a cap on the super chats? We're currently sitting at about 14 left.
Yes, we're going to have to put a cap on the super chats for tonight. I thank you all so much for the support. It helps us to run this channel a great deal. And of course, I'm heavily appreciative to everyone who does send in one. But unfortunately, and tonight I'm going to have to be serious about this, we will not be able to answer any super chats beyond this point. Usually the streams are very long. And also, we're incredibly exhausted as well about at this point. So we don't want to keep them going on for too long. But if you would like to support this channel, because of course, the support is wonderful, and I'm not complaining about it or anything. You can always go to the merchandise store and buy some merchandise. We have some very nice t-shirts, some very nice mugs, and you can probably ask a lot of people here in this chat. The merchandise is actually pretty cool looking and is very high quality. So if you would like to support the channel, you could get something really cool out of it and go get like a mug or a t-shirt or something like that. So with that, I thank everyone for their support. We're going to answer all the super chats we have left for tonight, and then we're going to move on to the live chat questions and answer some of those. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 donation from Pedal Juice, who says, Ukraine today has similarities with the 1956 Hungarian Revolution. However, now Russia's hypocrisy and its systemic use of terror are laid bare for all the world to see, if it so chooses.
I could very much agree with that, but at the same time, Hungary was a communist country that was in the Eastern Bloc, so in that regard, it was different. It was different for sure in a way, because Hungary was actually a part of an alliance, unlike Ukraine, that was in an uneasy situation with Russia and was really leaning more towards being an adversary of the Russians than a friend. So in that regard, it is different, but I can see what you're saying about the terrorism. That is entirely true, and the whole entire world is seeing what the Russians are actually made of, and what the Russian spirit is, which is just very vile. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $8 donation from Fat Bass, who says, I would love to see you and Denis Davidov get together at some time. He's right on, and Erdogan is a cynical monster not to be trusted. Nevertheless, I'm thankful that he's restricted to the Bosphorus.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I will try and look into teaming up with that channel. We're getting a lot of suggestions tonight about channels to team up with, and I will look into it. To move on down into Turkey, it is kind of good that he is relegated into the Bosphorus. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comments in a way. And with that, I thank you so much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Acid Rain, and we have a $5 donation from Douglas Murphy again. So thank you very much to both of you for your support, and it's very much appreciated. Moving on to the next question, we have a $5 donation from Moloko5, who says, the officer shooting himself in his sleep sounds very fishy to me. I bet the prisoners shot the officer so they could surrender. It was no accident.
Probably. I mean, like, honestly, that may be true, but at the same time, don't you? I think it would garner the prisoners a lot more sympathy if they said we killed our officer, so that way we could surrender to y'all. I feel like they would just be honest at that point and say that, instead of trying to come up with some convoluted hanky-panky story about he shot himself in his sleep or something. Because at that point, it doesn't matter. It's not like you're having to report to Russian higher-ups. You're now just recounting the story to your Ukrainian captors. So I thank you very much for the support. That may be the case. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not, of course, I don't know everything. That could be the way it happened. A lot of people have been saying that he was most likely fragged, and that may be the case. So I thank you very much for the support, and I do thank you very much for weighing in on that situation. It is something that has been highly discussed here in the chat tonight. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Ann Towner, who says, I've seen one or two things about a possible coup in Russia. Have you heard anything about this, or is it just war rumors?
I have heard about it, but one thing that I'm very careful about doing now is saying that something like that's confirmed. We heard that Sergei Shoigu was poisoned a while ago, and I put that as the title of one of my videos. And then just a few days later, he came out and was perfectly fine and healthy and was talking to Putin. Of course, that was the one where everyone started making the memes about how close that table was and they were almost on top of each other. But at the same time, he came out and he was alive and okay and he hadn't been poisoned. And we had gotten that information, I believe, from the Ukrainians. So, but I'm not really sure about that. If I recall, I think that may have just been something that was making the rounds, and I'm not really sure if the Ukrainians confirmed that or not. But at the same time, information about internal Russian affairs is always questionable, because I think we've heard something similar to this before, and it didn't actually pan out. And so I want to wait until we get confirmed hardcore evidence about massive coups and things like that going on inside of the country, because that's something very questionable to cover, because it could turn out to not be true, and then I'm sitting here eating my own foot because it wasn't true, and I reported on it like it was something actually happening. So I'm going to wait for more news to come out on that before I report on it, but it may be happening or it may not be happening. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Digital Bloodeka, who says, have a can of bananas on me. The only language where it's called the only language. Wow, I'm getting tired. But anyways, let me start over to say it properly. Have a can of bananas on me. The only language where it's called pineapple is English. Haha.
Well, I do thank you very much for the support, and I do think I did know that fact somewhere deep in the back of my head, but I just never really thought about it. Actually, honestly, I'm just going to say I didn't know that, because that sounds like I'm trying to like say, well, I knew it, and yeah, it doesn't matter. That is something interesting to know, and I do thank you very much for providing us with some bananas. I think it's actually pronounced that way in Spanish, if I remember my Spanish class correctly, but I'm not really sure. Take that with a grain of salt. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I will enjoy them. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Kevin Scott 76, who says, have you seen Eli from Russia channel? Very good. Latest video, she covered a small town in Russia, Victory Day. They were focused on World War II, but not this war.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I think I may have seen that particular video you were talking about. Of course, Victory Day is not really revolving around what the Russians are doing right now. It's always going to be revolving around World War II, and so I could see that in a way, but at the same time, that is something interesting to note, that they wouldn't tie in anything with Ukraine, considering that the government's been leaning heavily in the direction of trying to tie in Victory Day to what's going on in Ukraine. So I thank you very much for the support. I will try and take a look at that channel. I haven't heard about them, but that does sound like an interesting channel for sure. And with that, I'm going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from CA Lags. He says, I expect any Russian coup to be run just like the one against Gorbachev. At least these seem to be the mentors for today's general staff.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. And yes, I could see that going in that direction as well. The coup that happened against Gorbachev was very silent, but at the same time, one has to remember in Soviet history that whenever any kind of coup happened, because that was really the only way that power exchanged hands in the Soviet Union was through coups, every time that happened, they always played something on TV on loop, and we haven't heard about that inside of Russia yet, although they may have changed that little strategy up, and they're no longer doing that. Still, there hasn't been any discernible evidence to me that there is an ongoing coup rather than the mention of it. So, of course, I'm going to still be waiting for the news. I'm going to have to stay adamant on that one because I don't want to report something just being gung-ho about it and then seeing that it's wrong, because I'm trying to report the most factual news on here. And, you know, that is kind of, for me right now, being in the area of tabloid news. And so I just want to wait and see, make sure that that is confirmed before I come out and start talking about that, because that's going to be a huge development if that did happen. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, though, not really confirming that a coup is happening or not right now. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Sniper1, who says, Volodymyr Zelenskyy is not just a president, but is an icon of democracy. Heart.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I do have to agree that he's been a very interesting statesman, a very successful one as well, and one that's trusted by his people from start to finish. He actually had a very interesting TV career before he became president, and as president, we've seen him do fairly well, actually, before Ukraine went into the war, although Ukraine was going towards the path of corruption before Zelenskyy became president, and it was curbed. And it looked like Zelenskyy was going to start heading in the direction of rooting out the corruption by the laws he was passing and stuff. But of course, all of that's been broken by this ongoing war right now, and they're having to now focus on the war instead of the domestic concerns that they were looking at when Zelenskyy was president during peacetime. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Hegemony Cricket, who is referencing my mispronunciation of Sweden as Swedland. He says, on a national level, Sweden and Finland are not the best of friends. Some may be offended if you combine their names.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but one thing I do have to say is that it's, I understand that, you know, they're not really the best of friends, but not a lot of countries are the best of friends, even if they are kind of in the same situation. And for me, honestly, it's not really trying to tie them together like they're friends, but they are in the same situation, in the same boat right now. It's kind of like talking about Benelux, you know, where you're talking about Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg all in the same group. I mean, like, you know, the question isn't are they friends? They're kind of all in just that same category if they all kind of do things at the same time. So that's kind of how I'm looking at Sweden and Finland, and I think I will have to persist with calling them Swedland. And if anyone takes offense to that, understand I'm not trying to sit here and act like y'all are going to be sitting in the same room and like get married and have kids or anything. I'm just saying that they're in the same situation and trying to join NATO. So I thank you very much for the support. I understand where you're coming from, but hopefully that won't offend anyone all too much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, you'd never guess who is next. We have another $5 donation from Sniper1, who says, the sanctions will not end till the end of Putin's rule.
Hopefully that is the case, because then that'll also speed along a quick government change in Russia after this war is over, considering that the Russians will desperately be needing foreign goods to continue on with modern life. Without computer processors and things like that, the Russians will never be able to progress along with the rest of the world into the next age, pretty much. So I thank you very much for the support, and also saying that that is very true, and hopefully that will remain the stance that the West takes as far as the sanctions are concerned. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Mellow Yellow Music Studios, who says, do you think Russia will continue to be contained after they lose, or do you think the West will lift the sanctions?
Could you reread that one for me real quick?
They say, do you think Russia will continue to be contained after they lose, or do you think the West will lift the sanctions?
I think it's a really tricky one to say, because I think the West will lift the sanctions, because these sanctions were imposed directly about the war, not really Putin himself. And so I feel like they would, as long as the Ukrainians win. If the Ukrainians lose, I think the sanctions will stay to punish the Russians for what they did. Of course, the Russians are not going to win. We can see now clearly that that's never going to be the case, because they failed on all of their primary objectives. But still, I think that they'll most likely be lifted once the war is over, although they could be kept in place as punishment for Putin being in charge. But then that's kind of negating the whole reason of the sanctions, which are supposed to be ending the war. And if the sanctions are never going to be ended even after the war is over, it's kind of negating that entire negotiating stance as far as lifting the sanctions if the war ends. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Hegemony Cricket, who says, stories of a coup underway in Russia could be a Ukrainian psyop intended to sow chaos in the Kremlin.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And I think that that may be a pretty reasonable explanation of what they're saying. I think that may just be trying to sow paranoia into Putin's head. There may be no coup underway. They're just saying that to freak him out and get inside of his head. And I think that may be something that they're doing entirely. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And also, I just saw Aaron Tarleton say something in the live chat, and I got to say, I'm not going to say it on stream, but Aaron, what is this, man? Anyways, with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
I just saw the same thing. But anyways, moving on, we have a $5 donation from CA Lags again, who says, Russia's greatest Maskirovka was their appearance of strength.
That is entirely true, and that's something that's completely fallen apart now that they've entered a serious ground war. And we can see that the Russians do not exert any kind of idea of strength at all, especially when they're actually having to get down and dirty into business. So I thank you very much for the support, and that is entirely true. I can agree with that assessment 100%. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from the Humbled Potato, who says, regarding the washing machines, they may pull the electronics and use the parts as spares or sell as spare parts.
I thank you very much for the support, and I think that we actually had someone say that earlier as well, something about the microelectronics or something like that within the system. And I can't agree with that. I think that that may be one of the reasons why they're moving the washing machines around, but I'm not entirely sure. Once again, I think that may just be one theory at the moment, and hopefully we can get a clear answer as to what they're actually doing with the washing machines near the later end of the war or at the or after the war. So with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question or will answer the comment in a way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Quiet Gamer, who says, Vikings came from Norway. Norway is tough, saying that Vikings saying on Finns have the power of darkness. Finns are wizards.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and it's wonderful to hear again that there's Norwegians here in this chat who are supporting their Norwegian heritage, and it's wonderful to hear that they apparently have a saying about the Finns as well, that it sounds pretty neat. Also, another thing I was just thinking about is that people say that the Finns and the Swedes are not on good terms, at least diplomatically, but my thing is that if they're not on good terms, then how come the Finns buy Swedish arms? That's something interesting to me, because we actually know that they have a decent amount of Stridsvagens, which are made by the Swedes. So I thank y'all. I thank you very much for support. Also, the interesting words that Norway has to say about Finland. That's of course wonderful to hear, and I hope that that kind of weighs in on on a point about Sweden and Finland, because if they weren't at good terms, then how come Finland is buying arms from Sweden? So with that, once again, we're going to move on to the next question. Before we do, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
So we currently have about 8 left.
All right, and with that, on to the next question.
Okay, and next up, we have a $5 donation from Coaching Addiction, who says, with drones being such a huge part of this war and being so successful, what do you think the future of counteroffensive technology will look like?
I think, well, it's obviously going to be based a lot around drones. We can see that drones are being used a large amount in defense and offense, kind of like an artillery piece or a sniper. And as far as pertaining to that, it's really such a fluid and really like be all fix all kind of situation with the drones, at least in my opinion, that you're not going to see anything specific coming out in terms of like counteroffensive strategies and stuff like that. That drone warfare is going to evolve into an offensive, a defensive strategy, and everything else in between. So at least that's my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. It could be wrong, but I think that they're going to start evolving drones to be a facet of every form of combat, including the offense and the defense. So with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Hegemony Cricket, who says, as villages are evacuated, all washing machines should be mined so they explode the second they are moved.
That's a pretty good idea, and I think the Russians would start to take thousands of casualties a day if that was the case. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the joke. That's a pretty good one. I like that. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $2 donation from Philip Fixes, who says, doo-doo-dee-da, doo-dee-dee-da, doo-doo-doo, Bay Rocktar.
Bayraktar. Yeah, thank you very much for the support. Hopefully I rolled that R perfectly. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question. Thank you so much for the support.
And moving on, we have a $2 donation from Rafaus Sean, who says, please watch Sky interview with General Budanov.
Thank you very much for the support, and I will try to. I've gotten a lot of suggestions to do that. It's something I want to get around to, but whenever I hear the word interview, I'm like, oh my lord, that's probably like an hour long. And it's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, you know, like I just can't pay attention for an hour. I don't have an hour of time, so I'd have to see if I could watch that, but I would like to. So I'll try and pull it up and take a look at it. And I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And just real quick, to answer Mana Culture's question, yes, we answered it, I think, about 10 or 15 super chats back. So unfortunately, we have answered it, but if you go back and just rewind the stream a little bit, you will be able to see the answer to it. But thank you again for your support. So up next, we have a $2 donation from Mr. Lunchtime, who says, Chicken McPutin's on me. Great work, guys.
And I thank you so much for the support, Mr. Lunchtime. It does mean a lot, and I'm sure the chat's going to go wild now that Mr. Lunchtime's in the house. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. Also, the little joke, I like it. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $3 donation from Mellow Yellow Music Studios again. Thank you very much for your support of the channel. And up next, we have a $2 donation from Thomas Green, who says, you give us the best news on the war in Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and that is something that I pride myself on, of course, here on this channel, and hopefully I can continue this kind of news coverage and the quality of it into other topics that this channel will hopefully be covering in the future. I would, of course, like to expand out and not just make this Ukraine war thing when this war starts to simmer down, and make it an all overarching kind of news thing where people can come here and get reliable, unbiased, and informative news all the time about everything. That's kind of my goal here in the future. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, the machine gun guy hit both of the casualties.
That's a pretty good one. I like that. And I thank you very much for the support. Of course, it does help us out a lot. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says they need the washing machines for the brown pants.
I do agree. I actually said that before on stream, and that is a pretty good joke. So I do agree. Yes, they probably need the washing machines because of how scared they are the whole entire time they're there. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And let's see, our last super chat of the night goes to Philip Fixes, who puts in a $2 donation and says, keeping it Cronkite, that is why we love you. And yes, Cronkite was a really good news anchor, and it's a shame we don't have many more of those type people around anymore.
Yes, I do have to agree that Cronkite was a pretty solid guy, and I do thank you so much for the support and such the praise, really, to kind of like put us on the same level as Cronkite. You know, I've always thought that I could always be as unbiased a reporter as any reporter from the 80s or the 70s. I mean, like, reporters back then were kind of in their golden age. They reported the news. They came on like I did for about 2 or 3 hours. They reported the news, and then they dipped. And that was it. That was all the news you got. You didn't have to cover 24 hours of news every day to keep people entertained. You didn't have to come up with tabloid stories. You didn't have to overtalk things and come up with opinion panels to just keep the airtime running. You just reported the news. It was chock full of information. It was completely unbiased. And then they got off the air and they went on to some other kind of programming. And I like that. And I think that's the way news should still be run. Just because it's 24 hours a day doesn't mean it's good, in my opinion. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support once again. And with that, I'm going to have to remind everyone that we did put a cutoff tonight, and while I do want to read off the super chats that did come in after the cutoff, unfortunately I'm going to have to enforce it because like last night I saw, if I try and answer a few questions, I just sit here for till the end of time answering super chats to keep on coming. And I thank you so much for the support. Before like I say that and sound a certain way, I thank you all so much for the support, but I am exhausted, and Matthew is too, and we always have to make sure that we get some sleep, and we can make sure to keep on functioning, at least on a basic level. And so with that, I thank you all so much for your support, and everyone who did send in a super chat after the cutoff. We would love to answer the questions, but sadly they were sent in after the cutoff. And with that, we're now going to move on to the questions from the live chat.
And yes, thank you very much to all of you that sent in a super chat after the cutoff. We appreciate you very much. And to move on to our highly anticipated live chat questions, first up we have one from a longtime channel supporter, Zeta Lane, who says, Enforcer, have there been any lessons that come out of World War I about how to resolve trench warfare, stalemate, maybe current munitions and communications create new options, ?
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Zeta Lane, and it's wonderful to hear from you again. I haven't heard from you a lot. I've seen you in the chat, but of course, it's wonderful to hear from you. To answer that question, World War I started to show that the direction that warfare went in near the end that started to break up trench warfare was the advent of the tank and air support for the large part. Machine guns was what created trench warfare. The tank and the airplane was what started to kind of break it up a little bit. And I would really attribute most of that success to the tank. The tank at the time was able to move across the field and provide fire support either by 3-pound, well, when we're talking about the British Mark IV, the 3-pounder guns, and also some of the Lewis guns and Vickers guns that would be equipped into the tanks, is of course something that started to lead to great British successes, at least in capturing of land in World War I numbers, and I believe was really one of the main reasons why the war started to get broken out of the trench warfare phase. However, tanks exist in the modern day already, and we can see that they've now become something that's no longer really usable to break through areas. You know, large armored waves just don't seem to be the strategy anymore. And so, I think the best way to break up trench warfare these days would be through artillery and drone operations. And now we're going really back into World War I strategy to try and break this up. But with the ability to deliver munitions precisely with drones, I think that there's a load of opportunity to be able to just literally select and pick off Russian units to the point that there's actually a gap in the front that the Ukrainians can then exploit. So, once again, that's entirely my opinion. It would take a large amount of drones to do something like that, and of course that'd be entirely reliant on none of those drones got destroyed and all of their bombs hit their mark, and all of that is really getting into like a gray area of assumptions. So that's kind of my assessment of it, you know, my layman assessment of it. So I hope that does answer the question in a way. And I thank you so much for asking, Winsita Lane. It's wonderful to hear from you, and I hope that you did enjoy me answering your question. And with that, we're going to move on to 2 more questions from the live chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream because this thing is going on forever. So with that, on to the next question.
So next up, we have a question from the Exquisitor, who says, Enforcer, have you heard anything more about civilians who have been forced to enter Russian territory?
I haven't really heard anything more about them. We did hear a decent amount about civilians being forced into Russia for a while, but recently we haven't been hearing that. So I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the night. And so, who is the person who sent in the last question?
So the last question of the night goes to Jordan Grant, who says, Enforcer, what do you think is Ukraine's best asset to win this war at the moment, considering what they've accomplished so far with their tactics?
I think the best asset for the Ukrainians to win this war is their artillery. We can see that their artillery, due to its pinpoint and precise accuracy that is being assisted by drones, is pretty much the key winning factor in inflicting casualties on the Russian forces to the point that they're nearly decimated, destroyed, or have to retreat due to heavy losses. I believe that that is the best thing they have going for them right now, and so their entire military should revolve around the supplying of the artillery and the heavy use of it, and also the precision of it. And so, with that, I think that answers the question the best I can, and we've reached the end of tonight's stream. It's once again been a pleasure to run this stream and deliver the news to all of y'all. I hope you all have enjoyed it as well. And as usual, if you've made it all the way through the stream to this point and you're new to this channel, welcome. You apparently are a trooper and you've enjoyed this a very good amount if you stayed through the entire question segment. And so, if you would like to see more of this, we run these streams every single night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, and tomorrow is going to be our Sunday night fundraiser. So you have joined at the perfect time. So, make sure to subscribe and hop in tomorrow for Sunday night fundraiser, and hopefully we can blow this thing out of the water, and then next week when Funker 530 and Starsky are on at the same time, we can reach an unbelievable goal. I already have a goal in mind. I'm trying to eyeball if it will be possible, but I think the Lee Spring Army is capable of doing anything, and the goal that we set out will be achieved, and it will go down in history. So, thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow on the 10 p.m. stream. That is the Sunday night fundraiser. Thank you all once again. I hope we are able to blow the goal out of the water. And Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. Thank you, and I hope you all have a great night.
Запануй